In France, on the coast of Normandy, in an immense bay, swept by one of the strongest tides on the planet, stands Mont-Saint-Michel, a picturesque structure on a block of solid granite. Its feet in the water, its head in the clouds, decorated with an abbey sculpted by man over 1,000 years and frequented by nearly 3 million visitors per year. This stunning rock is as impressive as it is intriguing.
This most amazing architecture, stone-built architecture, reaching into the skies. Wow.
The first time, my breath was taken away.
Both a remarkable abbey and an impenetrable fortress, the distinctive silhouette is famous worldwide. But there are still secrets from its history waiting to be revealed.
There was a belief that we knew everything about Mont-Saint-Michel, but what we're finding out is we know virtually nothing.
Nowadays, when the human eye can't see far enough, science and technology can take the reins to try and reveal the invisible and probe the impenetrable.
We can capture the image from inside the pillar without digging or drilling.
By examining the mount from the infinitely big to the infinitely small.
So we'll take the first measurements.
With the help of the most modern scientific tools, today's experts will dissect the work of yesterday's builders to complete this monument's history and expose the mysteries which still elude us.
There are so many constructions built on the rock that we need to see in 3 dimensions.
The Mont-Saint-Michel is a whole thing. It's not a landscape, it's not a postcard. It's 13 centuries of history in a 600 million year-old bay.
By probing the depth of this breathtaking structure, built over 1,000 years of successive layers of construction, we can enter the bowels of a 500 million year-old mount and examine its immense bay, declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO and subject to the most powerful tide in Europe.
This stone, which fell from the sky into a marine world, has most likely always intrigued man.
What are the stones of this picturesque abbey hiding? What new discoveries allow us to understand the secret of its resistance when faced with France's longest and most violent conflict?
In terms of military strategy, the architectural combination here is particularly remarkable.
How did a rock appear in the middle of this infinitely flat bay? And what threats is it facing today?
If the sea wasn't there, it would be dramatic.
In 35 to 40 years, the mount would have been reattached to the mainland if nothing had been done.
History, science, construction. Examined like never before, Mont-Saint-Michel reveals itself at last, on all scales. The fame of Mont-Saint-Michel is thanks in part to the impressive architecture which decorates it. And it's the iconic shape of its sculptural silhouette, carved over the centuries by ancient builders, which intrigues today's experts the most.
When you approach the Mont-Saint-Michel Abbey, you are, of course, struck by the sheer size of the buildings.
Mont-Saint-Michel is like a jigsaw that is made up of lots of different pieces from different puzzles.
An assembly which might appear disparate elsewhere, and here it creates harmony in a place which is like no other.
The jigsaw-like nature of this spectacular abbey can be explained by the incredible duration of its construction. For over 1,000 years, from the 8th century to the 19th, the construction sites followed one another, each making a new contribution to the structure, shaping a puzzle over 80 meters high that experts are trying to dismantle today to better understand the assembly. The progress of science and technology allows us, little by little, to shine a light in its dark corners and answer this first question: what are the pieces of this unique game of construction hiding? Clues to solve the first mystery are found deep in the bowels of the mount, at the origin of the abbey.
At the heart of the abbey is an ancient church called Notre-Dame-sous-Terre, which we rediscovered only a little more than a century ago.
It is the oldest building in the abbey. It is where it all started, actually.
More than 20 meters underneath the abbey's main level, the church of Notre-Dame-sous-Terre is entirely hidden away from the exterior. Today, three-dimensional modeling of the mount allows us to see it. This church, 18 meters long and 8 meters wide, could be the answer to the experts' main question. How and where did the construction of the abbey begin? Nowadays, this old chapel is only accessible during rare guided tours. Xavier Bailly has the keys to open it.
We're going into the most ancient part of the abbey.
He is the abbey's administrator, so he knows every room in this unique architectural assembly.
It's always impressive entering this part of the abbey, which is the most secret, the most difficult to access. We are, in a way, inside the bowels of the abbey. The temperature reminds us of that.
According to ancient manuscripts, the abbey's first sanctuary was built in the 8th century and supervised by the bishop, Aubert. For a considerable time, Notre-Dame-sous-Terre was thought of as the original sanctuary. But is it really?
The starting point for the enigma that we need to resolve here at Mont-Saint-Michel Abbey is, are we in the presumed place of Aubert's first sanctuary? A sanctuary that we know from the chronicles was built at the dawn of the 8th century.
For centuries, Notre-Dame-sous-Terre has managed to keep its age a secret. But now, science has found a way of making it talk.
These days, there are several techniques which allow us to date bricks and therefore date the walls fairly accurately.
In effect, we can survey the walls, survey the ground, we can precisely date certain masonry.
One of the methods for dating, which has revealed the age of the old church, is archaeomagnetism. This science is based on a laboratory analysis of the magnetic properties of terracotta. Brick samples were taken from the ancient chapel walls and entrusted to Philippe Lanos, Director of Research at the CNRS.
We are looking to determine the magnetization carried by each specimen here on the tray, which will allow us to find the date that each brick was baked on.
This ever-progressing technique now allows experts to date terracotta from the end of the Paleolithic era to the present, with a precision of just 20 years. To better understand how scientists can use these samples to unravel the mystery of the ancient chapel's construction, you have to look inside the bricks on a microscopic scale.
So we'll take the first measurement.
The bricks' baking date is engraved into their composition. This is because of a simple but fascinating phenomenon. Clay contains ferromagnetic particles. Before being baked, these particles are not fixed in place. They point north and tilt towards the Earth's surface, depending on the Earth's magnetic field, exactly like the needle of a compass. This magnetic field slowly evolves throughout the ages, so the particles take a different position depending on the era. And on the day of their baking, they're immobilized. Their position indicates for eternity the era of their baking, and therefore their age.
And finally, we obtain the average inclination, the average declension, and the magnetic intensity for the measured specimen. The average intensity calculated from all the specimens taken from Notre-Dame-sous-Terre shows us that the date must be between 950 and 960 AD.
Examined in a way that was impossible only a few years ago, the hidden church of Notre-Dame-sous-Terre has revealed its age. It dates from the 10th century, not the 8th, as many experts thought. The revelation allows them to correct the date when construction began at the abbey.
Thanks to this dating, this small church from the 10th century has revealed more about itself.
It isn't from Saint-Aubert's era.
Notre-Dame-sous-Terre is the second structure, chronologically speaking.
It is undoubtedly a church which replaced the first sanctuary.
So, Notre-Dame-sous-Terre is only the second piece in this game of construction, but it is still the oldest discovery to date. After it was built, a series of other buildings would accumulate over the centuries. To accommodate a growing influx of pilgrims, builders from the Middle Ages relentlessly built even more ambitious and higher structures.
Mont-Saint-Michel is essentially a rock in the sea upon which an entire abbey has been built. Now, abbeys normally get built on flat land, but on Mont-Saint-Michel, that's not possible.
The top of the rock measured about 30 meters, yet the monks wanted the church 80 meters long. That's why they decided, and it was completely crazy, to construct a giant artificial plateau at 80 meters altitude on the top of the Mont-Saint-Michel.
This building's aim is to reunite on 3 levels what would be horizontal elsewhere.
People don't always realize that when they come to the Mont-Saint-Michel, they spend their time walking on vaults and over a void.
The narrowness of the mount forced builders to overlay structures instead of lining them up side by side. To build a new church, they had to design a system of foundations adapted for the site. To the west, they relied on the ancient church Notre-Dame-sous-Terre. To the east and to the south, they built crypts on the slope in order to support the building's immense structure.
The engineering of Mont-Saint-Michel is absolutely amazing because it's been added to so many times. So not only are you building a temple complex, you're also building it on top of a rock in the middle of the sea.
It's the genius of man that shows in this architecture, which reaches a height that is absolutely incredible for builders from the 13th century.
We talk a lot about the construction of the Mont-Saint-Michel, the different stages.
And over history, it's been added to, and bits have fallen down, and bits have been stuck on, and bits have been put over other bits.
Fires, cave-ins. Over 11 centuries of construction, the abbey evidently wasn't safe from catastrophes. And this game of construction and deconstruction complicates the historian's work, but it also leads to new revelations. Behind every collapse lies a crucial clue concerning the history of the abbey, like an area of this Romanesque church called the choir. In the 15th century, the choir collapsed, so the monks replaced it with a flamboyant Gothic choir. And Yves Gallet, an expert in Gothic architecture, recently discovered that this choir was concealing information which would transform the mount's architectural history.
We're in the apse of a church from the end of the Middle Ages, and in general, it looks its age. But if you look at the details, all of the architecture seems older, or refers to older models than those from the era of this part of the church's construction. Which is a little curious. So the question we ask ourselves is, why would an architect from the 15th century use a model from the 13th century structure or the beginning of the 14th?
The architect's unusual choice convinced Yves Gallet that something was hidden behind it. And a discovery from the 1960s strengthened his belief. During the restoration of this choir's tiling, the technicians were forced to remove the lower parts of some of the Gothic pillars.
And we realized that under certain columns, but the survey wasn't carried out entirely, there were Roman relics.
Romanesque relics in a Gothic pillar, so the answer to the architect's choice is to be found in the heart of these massive columns and at their base in the crypt below, large pillars which support the church's choir.
It's their thickness which is remarkable. There are few structures in Gothic architecture with such powerful pillars. We suspect that these pillars weren't entirely new at the moment of the crypt's construction, but more ancient masonry that was reinforced and consolidated. It was that of the first crypt, the crypt which bore the apse that collapsed in 1421. It would be ideal to take a stone out and look at it, but considering what's above our heads, we better not do it. Not today.
But since the 1960s, technology has evolved rapidly. Now it's possible to probe the heart of the columns without breaking them.
This equipment is a georadar, which is dedicated to seeing what there is under the first 50 centimeters, even a meter.
So the principle is simple: an antenna which emits a radio wave, an antenna which receives it.
So now I am starting the acquisition.
Georadar allows us to see through the ground or walls. It sends electromagnetic waves at a high frequency which can penetrate solid material. When a wave encounters a change in material, part of it is reflected back to the surface. The reflected energy and the speed of the waves depend on the properties of the material it traverses. So, by sensing these changes, the georadar can detect the depth, density, and position of any buried objects.
We have an image which is both an image of the distance traveled, and here, on this scale, we have time. We can convert this time, which is in fact the time going back and forth, since the waves went into the pillar and came back out in depth.
Those echoes there, what are they linked to?
Well, we can see reflections, which link to what the irregularities of the interior mass will be.
It seems that the inside of the pillar isn't homogeneous. We have a confirmation of what we thought. We have a feeling that inside these columns, there's a more ancient core which is preserved.
It is extremely satisfying, since we have the picture of inside the pillar without digging or drilling.
The revelation allows Yves Gallet to update the history of this abbey's construction.
Basically, the collapse of 1421 was not a complete collapse. The Roman columns from the crypt remained in place, and the architect from the 15th century was asked to rebuild the apse, which had to fit into the remains which were already in place. So a plan was imposed upon him, which gave the Mont-Saint-Michel's apse its slightly archaic characteristics. To put it simply, the remains of this previous church dictated, in a way, the new construction plan.
From the outset, it looks homogeneous, and even up close, you start to think, was this all built at one time? But in fact, it wasn't.
Incidentally, this gives the place its singularity and beauty. It is the terracing of these architectural ensembles which are representative of different eras, different styles, and at the same time compose something perfectly harmonious.
The stone that's used is similar throughout all of the island. And because of this, it appears to be homogeneous. It appears to all be one, but it's not.
What's unique about Mont-Saint-Michel is that we have trouble making the distinction between geology and architecture. We truly have the impression that we're seeing architecture growing from the geology.
Underneath this unique architectural masterpiece lies an immense hidden block of granite that was once known as the Mont Tombe.
This stone, which fell from the sky into a marine world, has most likely always intrigued man.
When and how was this impressive rock born?
The very essence of Mont-Saint-Michel is this granite, and if we date these rocks, we see that they're about 540 to 550 million years old.
This mount, born millions of years ago, didn't come from the sky. But surprisingly, it didn't rise up from the ground either. To solve the mystery behind its stunning appearance, you have to observe it at different scales. You have to both dig into its heart, but also take to the sky. The secret of its origins lies partly in its geological location. With the help of satellite imagery, we can relocate the mount. The flat bay on which it sits is actually part of an ancient mountain range, eroded by time, the Armorican Massif.
Mont-Saint-Michel is really part of the Armorican Massif. These mountains were as high as the Alps or the Himalayas. But this mountain range no longer exists anymore because it's been eroded. There's no relief around us. You can't ski in Normandy or Brittany.
So why is the Mont Tombe still visible? The answer to this question lies in the rock's remarkable formation. 550 million years ago, this rock was in a liquid state, a single gigantic bubble of molten magma at more than 1,000 degrees, straight from the bowels of the Earth.
We as geologists say that it's a magmatic rock, so it's all in the name. It means it's a rock which comes from magma.
So this is what we call eruptive or intrusive rocks, which means these rocks of molten magma appeared at the Earth's crust.
So it was a bubble of magma which rose through the Earth's crust, but didn't arrive at the surface. If one arrives at the surface, it creates a volcano. But when they rise up underneath mountain ranges, you understand that underneath those mountain ranges, the Earth's crust has become creased, so there will be folds. And these folds stop magma from rising up.
Trapped at the root of the Armorican Massif, this giant bubble of magma cooled to become a block of solid granite. But the mountain range which surrounded it was composed of a rock called schist. It's the difference between these two minerals which explain how the mountains disappeared, while the rock of Mont-Saint-Michel survived. At a microscopic scale, we discovered that the mount's granite is composed of crystals of quartz, feldspar, and mica, which creates its extraordinary resistance. The schist of the bay is made up of layers of softer sediment which eroded over time.
Then the rest of the ground has been eroded away, and suddenly you see this kind of almost like sugar loaf of a rock in the sea.
Erosion, little by little, stripped the surrounding area, and we saw this piece of rock appear, eventually rising from the deepest depths of the earth and emerging between two neighbors, the island of Tombelaine, which is situated just behind, and the Mont Dol, which is nowadays a little further inland on the Breton side.
From the very beginning of its creation, Mont-Saint-Michel has distinguished itself with incredible endurance. Even once sculpted by man, it continued to stand the trials of time, becoming a formidable military fortress. Despite its location on the front line of English invasions since the Middle Ages, Mont-Saint-Michel never fell to invaders and became the last French stronghold on the Normandy coast.
Mont-Saint-Michel and Saint Michael symbolize resistance.
It became the emblem of France during the later stages of the 100 Years' War because it was the only fortified place in Normandy which resisted successfully the English.
Twice the English tried to take Mont-Saint-Michel, and they failed twice. And it was just considered as an impregnable fortress.
Now, explorations of the Mount's fortifications are revealing clues about the history of military strategy here. Investigators want to solve an enduring mystery. How did this isolated mount, with just a small military force, resist some of the most violent and lengthy assaults in history? Archaeologist François Caligny de la Haye, with a team from the National Institute for Preventative Archaeological Research, has been investigating the site. He wants to reveal the strategic evolution of the fortifications in all of its complexity, but the steep-sided site makes it a tricky location to study.
The Mont-Saint-Michel has had an eventful history, and this history is very difficult to understand because we're on a site with extremely complex topography. Hi, it's good for me. We at last have a mapped vision of what a traditional village could be like. We need a three-dimensional vision, you see. There are so many constructions built on the rock that the site is extremely complex to understand.
Like most archaeologists, François usually works on the ground on a macroscopic scale. He usually works with information drawn from the study of ancient documents or discovered by the naked eye during excavation. But today, working with a team of drone operators,
You can go up.
he changes his scale of observation.
There, we see very well.
Now, François can examine the evolution of the ramparts in more detail. An evolution which, just like the history of the abbey, was written over several stages and centuries.
For a long time, we estimated that the Mont-Saint-Michel didn't need fortifications because we're on a site which is naturally protected by both the sea, which engulfs the bay twice a day, as well as the rock's steep slope.
But this rock was quite vulnerable, in the beginning at least, because the village wasn't protected by ramparts.
It was only protected by wooden fences.
And in 1204, the Breton troops, allied with the King of France, Philip Auguste, managed to get into the village and set it on fire, and the abbey too.
So they drew the necessary conclusions.
Mont-Saint-Michel invested in its ramparts. It increased its protections.
In the 13th century, the wooden fence was replaced with stone ramparts. The aim was to protect the village, which at the time was concentrated on the higher ground.
So here we have the old layout from the 13th century, the Tour Claudine, so you need to get just above it. That section there corresponds to the outer wall from the 13th century. And from the angle marked by the curtain wall, go straight ahead, flying over the houses. And so these houses were in fact built under the influence of the outer wall of the 13th century. The images that we have here show that in the Mont-Saint-Michel's current grounds, we still have elements from the 13th century, which are preserved in the boundaries of the grounds.
Over time, the village grew and became too big for these stone ramparts, which could no longer protect it.
The church starts at the top. The village begins to grow up around it.
During the 100 Years' War, the fortifications had to be enlarged to protect all of the houses that had been built outside the first ramparts.
So the Mont-Saint-Michel became a genuine stronghold.
So that it didn't fall into the hands of the English, who, at the time, held the whole of Normandy.
To face the urgent threat of English troops, the Mount strategists built a line of ramparts on the beach, close to the tide level. Now the English had nowhere to dock and go ashore.
But Mont-Saint-Michel had improved its defences. It had brought its ramparts all the way down so that the walls virtually touched the sea. So there was no way of bringing siege engines in. There was no way of getting boats in because you'd just get stranded on the sand.
But the English were determined to bring down the impenetrable Mont-Saint-Michel. So, in 1423, they decided to settle on the island of Tomblaine, just 3 kilometers from the gates of the citadel, starting a siege that would last 30 years. The Mount's military strategists would be forced to adapt their defenses again.
The English were close, just there, close by, at Tomblaine.
The English twice tried to get their hands on the rock.
We're not just talking, oh, look, there's an island with a monastery on it, we're going to take it. They threw everything they had at it. They went at it all guns blazing.
That forced the Mount's captain to rethink the entrance of the Mont-Saint-Michel. Beforehand, it was accessed from the large door to the east.
So the weakest point was the door.
This eastern door was almost directly opposite the island of Tomblaine, where the English were based. So, the captain of the fortifications, Louis d'Estouteville, decided to seal this entrance and construct a new door to the south on the other side of the mount. Now, the English troops would be forced to go around, spending longer in the open at the foot of the fortifications, at the mercy of French fire.
In fact, after sealing the eastern door, if the English wanted to take the Mont-Saint-Michel and pass through the southern door, they were obliged to go under the ramparts and towers on foot. So here, evidently, on the parapets, the French garrison was there with muskets and crossbows. Incidentally, on the parapets, we still see the marks of archers from the past that protected the ramparts and also allowed the garrison to be able to shoot at the enemy situated on the pebble beach.
The new southern door is now used by visitors to Mont-Saint-Michel, while the old door on the east has remained hidden ever since the conflict. By examining information found in ancient texts and investigating the buildings here, François has managed to locate the door behind a tower called Demi-Lune.
So here you'll be able to approach the demi-lune. It's not really a tower, it's masonry in the shape of a tower, which seals this entrance from the 14th century. We can see very well. This is the first time I've seen aerial views of the Mont-Saint-Michel like this. And it's truly interesting because we're working from the ground as archaeologists and also from plans, ancient plans. And now seeing an aerial view of the mount is extremely interesting.
Discoveries by François and his team are revealing little by little the history of military strategy of this fortress. Now, during restoration of the northern rampart, the existence of a special watchtower known as an échif has been revealed.
The échif allows the protection of the ramparts, a flanking of the rampart between the northern tower and the bartizan, which was here. It served also as latrines for the garrison when they were on watch.
An échif is a temporary wooden structure set on top of the walls and fitted onto the ramparts. It reinforced the defense of the outer walls, providing lateral protection, an important role where the wall turns a corner. This structure perfectly complemented the strategy of moving the doors, forcing the English to go underneath. François, with an architect specializing in historic monuments, made this extraordinary discovery thanks to a faint clue. Traced into the sides of a parapet, they discovered the remains of an ancient opening 2.4 meters wide.
So here, on the parapet, we can still see the mark of the door which allowed entrance inside the échif. Here we have the right left foot of the door going up here, and there we have two stones which correspond to the right foot.
These details seem tiny compared to the immense scale of the mount, but they are important clues in the quest to better understand the island's defense strategy.
In terms of military strategy, everything is well thought out at Mont-Saint-Michel. The manner in which the fortifications are attached to those of the abbey, this combination and this architectural evolution is particularly superb here.
Mont-Saint-Michel's military strategists adapted their defenses as they faced varied threats over the centuries. But they also benefited from an extraordinary natural protection. The sea.
The sea is one of Mont-Saint-Michel's main defenses.
I mean, it is an island. It's in the sea. It's the greatest tidal range in all of Europe. And it's surrounded by quicksand.
It's a logistical nightmare for the military.
As soon as they tried to bring cannon by rafts or boats across and offload them onto the sands outside Mont-Saint-Michel, it took time to do that. The tide would start coming back in again. They lost their cannon or they have to set off again. It was a hopeless task.
Upon arrival, they had to turn back because the tide was coming in.
The origin of this quicksand is loose sediment carried into the bay by the coming and going of the tide. But here, in the seas around Mont-Saint-Michel, the natural phenomenon of the tide is expressed in a very unusual way.
The tides at Mont-Saint-Michel are amongst the 5 biggest tides in the world, with a tidal range of 15 meters between high and low tide.
The tidal range is the difference between the lowest tide and the highest tide. 15 meters, it's absolutely gigantic. Hard to imagine.
Once again, it's by using satellite images and locating the mount within the expanse of the bay that we can understand the origin of its exceptionally powerful tides.
Here, we're in the sea of the English Channel, which is a very particular bottleneck which creates tides that manifest here, like nowhere else. And it's one of the only places in the world where we have an alignment of Earth, Moon, Sun, which generates a tide which forms this landscape and which fills Mont-Saint-Michel with sediment.
These unique tides carry the sediment that creates quicksand around the mount. To uncover the secret of how quicksand is formed, hydraulics expert Romain Deguet is accompanied by Sylvie, one of the bay's official guides. Guides are the only people authorized to approach the quicksand.
So quicksand is most likely to be found in rivers, on riverbanks, and in former riverbeds.
To trigger the phenomenon of quicksand, the team need to add some energy.
There, that's pretty good.
There, it's going quickly.
You think of a poor traveller or tourist being sucked down and disappearing into quicksand. That, of course, is false. You can't sink down into quicksand entirely because of buoyancy. You can sink, let's say, at worst up to your waist. But the problem is still being stuck when the tide comes in.
The action of quicksand can be explained by its structure. Undetectable from the surface, you need to probe the depth to reveal its secrets. The structure is made up of thin layers of clay, water, sand, and salt. When there's pressure and energy on the surface, the layers give way. The water escapes and the sand solidifies around whatever has sunk down.
And I've got to get the water back around my ankles and around my legs to get out.
But the loose sediment that forms this quicksand presents a danger to the entire bay too, due to sandbanks which are moving ever closer to the mount. The sediment is carried in by the site's particularly powerful tides and then deposited in the bay, trapped by another one of the bay's characteristics.
It's a special characteristic because the tidal currents at the rising tide are much stronger than the tidal currents at ebbing tide. So a lot of the sediment will not be washed away by the ebbing tide, only part of it will be washed away.
And this was the beginning of the filling in of the bay as we know it today, and with each tide there are successive layers.
Which means that today we have the impression that the sea is coming less and less to the foot of the mount.
Mont-Saint-Michel has resisted the erosion of time and the most violent military assaults. But now, its very existence as an island is under threat by the influx of sediment.
In the 1990s, we saw the salt meadows. So, salt meadows are natural prairies which develop in the sands around the rock, approaching Mont-Saint-Michel in a worrying way.
Mont-Saint-Michel wouldn't be Mont-Saint-Michel without the sea.
If the sea wasn't there, it would be dramatic. 1,300 years of history are linked to its isolation, totally and intimately linked to its isolation.
This exceptional area, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, might undergo drastic transformation if nothing is done to protect it from the encroaching sandbanks. But the phenomenon has only been aggravated by the hand of man, most significantly with the 19th century construction of a road along a concrete dike.
The dike road was an umbilical cord between Mont-Saint-Michel and the continent, 2 kilometers away. However, the problem with this dike is that it accentuated the sandbank problem. So, in 1995, major restoration work to re-establish its marine characteristics were launched, and it was urgent to do so.
The restoration work, which ended in 2015, led to the replacement of the road dike by a bridge overpass which doesn't block currents, and the construction of a new dam designed to divert sediment back out to sea. The colossal dam located on the river Quenon, downstream from the mount, is the project's most impressive and ambitious work. This unique structure, 138 meters long, 32 meters wide, and 10 meters high, took 15 years of detailed planning and a further 15 years of construction before it was completed. Romain Deguet supervises the operation of the dam.
My role from day to day is to ensure that the dam works correctly and above all, depending on its impact, to improve its operation one day at a time. So here's the dam's control room. All of the dam's control takes place here. So here you can see all of the 8 valves, from the first one to the 8th one. The 2 fish bypasses right bank and left bank. A global view of the dam in view of the entrance to the dam's control room. This dam is unique in the sense that it functions in both directions.
During the rising tide, strong currents from the sea travel towards the Quenon River, carrying a large quantity of sediment. By closing the dam's valves, Romain can block the sediment-laden water. When the currents subside at high tide, the sediments settle to the seabed and become trapped at the foot of the dam. The water above is now clear and free of sediments. After the settling phase, the valves tilt to release the clear seawater into the Quenon, allowing the volume of water to rise considerably. When the tide draws the sea back, the currents are much weaker, leaving the sediment behind. Then, at low tide, the dam's valves open, this time from underneath, freeing the large volume of water stored in the Quenon. This provokes a flushing system. As the water is released, it carries the sediment too, sending it back out to the sea.
After more than 9 years of operation, we have already recovered about 60 hectares of what we call marine lands. These are lands which are regularly submerged by the tide.
Since the dam was built in 2009, regular surveys of the bay using terrestrial and airborne lasers have made it possible to precisely quantify the volume of deposited and flushed sediment. Between 2009 and 2018, there has been a significant decline in the amount of sediment upon which greenery and salt meadows have taken hold.
Since the dam was put in place, during the highest tides, Mont-Saint-Michel is once again completely surrounded by the sea.
So for 20 years, it's been putting the island back to as it was, basically an island in the sea.
Mont-Saint-Michel's isolation, for the moment, has been saved. The sea is the backdrop of the mount, but it's also its history.
You shouldn't forget one thing. It's that the pilgrims had to wait for the sea to open up to get there.
Mont-Saint-Michel is there, within sight, but inaccessible to anyone because of the sea. But then the sea opens up. The sea withdraws and lets us pass. Isn't that miraculous? Isn't that the most beautiful biblical evocation of those chosen people? The sea letting them pass?
It's almost as if it's been gifted by God. It's almost like the biblical scene where Moses parts the Red Sea.
In the Middle Ages, people spoke of Saint Michael at risk from the sea. It's a place that has to be earned.
And you're a pilgrim and you've been walking hundreds, if not thousands of miles. And then suddenly, you see this most amazing architecture, stone-built architecture, reaching into the skies. Wow.
So they felt they had really arrived close to heaven when they got to the other side.
It's almost impossible to approach Mont-Saint-Michel's history without reaching mysteries that scientific tools aren't equipped to investigate, the spiritual aspect of the site. But today, this feature of the site is tackled by experts who recently started to investigate the founding legend of the sacred mount, dedicated to the archangel Saint Michael. Mont-Saint-Michel owes its name to the archangel Saint Michael. At the peak of the mount, 156 meters up, an imposing iron statue, covered in gold, has dominated the base since the end of the 19th century. But recently, in the spring of 2016,
it returns, dazzling, serene, at 160 meters above sea level.
This 1,140-pound and 4.5-meter archangel descended to Earth. For 2 months, gilders and restoration experts worked to return it to its original brilliance and to repair damages caused by lightning and bad weather. The restoration was part of work to upgrade the abbey's protection against lightning. The statue's sword and wings are formed from copper, an electrically conductive metal, and an additional lightning conductor has been fitted to its wings. Today, this archangel protects man from lightning, but his original mission was very different.
Saint Michael is an important and dreaded character. Basically, he approves or denies your entrance into heaven.
In the Middle Ages, we started to consider the archangel as being a kind of knight from the sky, a character who was capable of fighting and finally beating the forces of evil.
Saint Michael holds the scale. He's the one who weighs your soul the day of the final judgment. So he has in his hands an object that will determine your fate for eternity, whether you will go to heaven or hell.
If people came on a pilgrimage to Mont-Saint-Michel, it was in some way to secure the favors of the archangel. He was a character that was feared.
So why did builders choose to construct this abbey on such an inaccessible rock in honor of the feared archangel? The answer to this mystery lies in a text from the 12th century called the Revelatio. This manuscript is the oldest known account of the founding of Mont-Saint-Michel in the 8th century.
It's thanks to this text of the Revelatio that we know a little about the circumstances of the creation of the first church dedicated to the archangel at the peak of the rock.
In fact, the text explains in Latin how the Bishop of Avranches, Aubert, was visited several times by Saint Michael and asked to build a sanctuary in his honor.
We discover that Mont-Saint-Michel was born from a dream. In fact, during his sleep, Bishop Aubert saw the apparition of the archangel Saint Michael.
But the bishop took quite some time before fulfilling the archangel's wishes.
Seeing as the archangel hadn't been obeyed, during his third visit, he placed his finger against the head of the sleeping bishop of Avranches,
which, according to the legend of the revelation, left a hole in his skull.
Bearing the scar from the archangel's finger on his pierced skull, Bishop Aubert obeyed and built a sanctuary on a rock called the Mont Tombe, that would later become known as Mont-Saint-Michel. Now, 1,000 years later, scientists have become interested in this legend because of a troubling discovery, a clue they now have the means to analyze, which is preserved in the Basilica of Avranches.
At the beginning of the 11th century, we found a skull with a hole in it there.
I'm about to take the skull of Saint Aubert out of its reliquary. Saint Aubert, who is also known for being the founder of the Mont-Saint-Michel. The particularity of this human skull is evidently the perforation that we have on the right parietal, and which was interpreted as being the result of the third apparition of Saint Michael to Aubert.
Here we have the proof from this relic that the archangel's finger was placed on the skull of the Bishop of Avranches.
This hole in the skull is the visible and tangible proof of the archangel's intervention and of this idea that he literally wanted to put the idea of building an abbey on the Mont-Saint-Michel into his head.
So, there is the proof that everything happened like it was told in the story.
But in the 21st century, can this historical mystery resist the progress of technology, which now gives access to ever greater scales of observation?
What really interests us is the hole on the right parietal bone.
The skull was the object of medical expertise, so a specialist in paleopathology, the study of ancient diseases, Dr. Tillot, has addressed the issue.
Dr. Pierre-Léon Tillot analyzed the sacred relic in a medical scanner, examining the suspicious hole. His aim was to collect scientific data and make a medical diagnosis. The lines of inquiry were numerous, from cancer to ancient surgery. But the specialist finally concluded that the hole was caused by an epidermoid cyst.
A cyst, in fact, happens when the skull is formed. When the skull grows together, a tip of epidermis gets stuck. It's like if you blow into a balloon through a ring. You have the balloon, which is blown up on both sides, and a perfect circle in the middle. This is a little bit similar to what happened in Aubert's skull.
It is very interesting that the scientists didn't dare show that Saint Aubert was a man like the rest.
So, in fact, today we know, or almost know, the reason for this hole. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this isn't the skull of the Bishop of Avranches, even if the hole wasn't left there by the archangel after his apparition.
There wasn't sufficient medical knowledge in the Middle Ages for the imagination not to run wild, to wonder, to build legend, exercise one's faith, which all contributed to the story of Saint-Aubert, which also contributed to the construction of Mont-Saint-Michel.
And you see, it's also proof that there are still things to discover.
Whether explaining its legend, probing its construction, or deciphering natural phenomena, new science and research is revealing the secrets of Mont-Saint-Michel in a way that was impossible before. Piece by piece, 1,000 years of this site's unique and complex history has been written, updated, and corrected, but it hasn't given up all its secrets yet.
What's left to be discovered at the Mont-Saint-Michel?
Do we know everything about Mont-Saint-Michel today? Maybe not.
It's difficult to know what's left to be discovered when we don't know what we're going to find.
We're surprised to discover it, despite having the impression that we'd seen it many times before.
It's obvious. We don't know everything about Mont-Saint-Michel. And perhaps we'll never know everything.
We are in the presence of an extremely well-known, visited and popular monument, but with a mysterious side.
We know virtually nothing. Every time a stone is unturned, every time a tree falls over, we find out something new about this remarkable island.
It has lasted for 1,300 years, and this place will still be magical long after we're gone.
In the Middle East, between the Red Sea and the Dead Sea, is Petra, a city nestled in the middle of the Jordanian desert in a vast rocky massif. Built over 2,000 years ago by a nomadic Arab population called the Nabataeans, many people consider it the 8th wonder of the world.
It is an incredible place.
The colors of Petra are just amazing.
You feel you're not on this planet.
Petra is known for its huge facades carved out of the rock, which are often used as scenery for films. But taking to the skies, we discover an archaeological site stretching 260 square kilometers with over 850 remains. A Nabataean city which still has many secrets to uncover.
It's like a puzzle, a huge puzzle.
We only have glimpses of their glorious city.
This city, forgotten for centuries, was rediscovered by a Swiss explorer 200 years ago. Today, archaeologists are still trying to complete its story and unravel the mysteries that elude them.
So we need some good pictures of this area.
With the help of the most modern scientific tools, they can probe the work of ancient builders.
And these technologies are giving us real insights into the building methods.
By examining Petra from different perspectives, from the infinitely big to the infinitely small, experts can detect details that are invisible to the human eye.
It's very exciting. We're almost on the telephone to the past.
Thanks to digital tools, the luxurious structures from Petra's golden age are brought back to life. This mythical city, which was at its peak in the 1st century BC, can finally reveal its true splendor.
Petra demonstrates opulence.
These cascading fountains and pools, and really it's basically showing off.
A Las Vegas of its time.
We will unlock the secrets of the sprawling desert city by examining its spectacular structures, starting with its most famous monument, Al-Hasne.
It is so dramatic because it's sculpted out of the rock itself.
What techniques did the Nabataeans, a population of nomadic traders, use to build such tall structures without modern tools? How did their masons transform this raw stone into an architectural diamond? And how did they find water in the middle of the desert and create one of antiquity's most advanced hydraulic systems?
It had water, and that is Petra's secret.
The main ingenious engineering of the Nabataeans was their hydraulic engineering.
History, science, construction, examined like never before. Petra reveals its secrets on every scale. To understand Petra, You first have to understand the secrets of this fascinating city's construction. It was built in the 1st century BC by a population of nomads, the Nabataeans. At the time, and still today, each visitor would enter by following this astonishing and winding natural passage known as the Sikh. 1,200 meters long and in places less than 3 meters wide, it leads to this breathtaking building, Al-Hasne.
The builders constructed it here specifically so that everyone entering the city would arrive facing this facade.
The outside was meant to be seen. This was to wow.
For archaeological experts, this monument is a true enigma. Now, thanks to new technology, they can unlock its secrets.
It's just mind-boggling the skill that went into it. The lines are so clean, the reliefs are so beautiful, and there's just no mistakes.
If you look at the detailed carvings, not only of the figures, but the decorations, perfect.
This incredible, lavishly decorated temple is about 39 meters high, the equivalent of a 12-story building. But how did the Nabataeans carve a structure which is as monumental as it is perfect from solid rock?
An interesting thing when we see the Hasne is first, obviously, its scale.
It's always been a mystery as to how they were able to construct these sculptures so high above the ground.
In this arid desert, wood resources are practically non-existent. It is impossible to find sufficient planks to build scaffolding. So, how did the Nabataeans raise themselves 40 meters from the ground in order to sculpt Al-Hasne? To solve this mystery, archaeologists today combine traditional observation techniques with sophisticated technology, revealing details that the human eye can't easily perceive. Kais Tswesi is the site's technical curator. Thanks to this machine called a total station, he can take precise measurements of the building. Then he processes the data on a computer to build an extremely accurate 3D projection.
Which is give us a very good accuracy, which is about 0.01 millimeter, which is very good for documentation.
The 3D model lets experts examine the smallest details of the facade. But do any clues remain that could reveal the Nabataeans' construction techniques? Details like the remains of fastenings for scaffolding? The first feature which become apparent are notches on either side of the monument. Changing the scale, thanks to digital zoom, reveals the shape of these strange notches. They are deeper at the base than at the top. They appear to be shaped for a human foot. But did Nabataeans builders use them to access their construction site?
They could only have been cut after the building's completion, so the building was already completely sculpted. They weren't used for its construction.
One of the theory for those footholds is for climbing the monument, looking for special finds like gold, and also for breaking the figures of the monument.
So these notches were hollowed out by raiders and not by the builders. Thanks to a careful examination of the facade and the digital model, archaeologists have also ruled out other false leads. For example, these small holes are not the remains of fastenings for scaffolding. They're bullet holes or marks from tools made long after the construction of Al-Hasne. To solve the enigma of its construction, experts have had to find other clues. Thibaut Fournet is a French architect and engineer at the CNRS. He has been studying one particular cliff for several months using a variety of techniques. This cliff is the site of a unique, partially carved building known as the Unfinished Monument.
This building is precious for archaeologists and architects because it allows us to have a snapshot of a building site halted during construction. And from this site, we can understand how the Nabataeans could sculpt a building on a cliff like this.
The site allows Thibault to analyze the ancient builder's work. This 4-column monument was intended to run down the side of the cliff. Only the upper parts have been carved, which means that the stonecutters started from the top. But how could they have worked on such a steep cliff?
Can you see this reddish part? Yes. I need, on this part, good pictures from quite close.
Today, Thibault wants to observe architectural features at the top of the facade. Just like the Nabataeans, he has also had to find a way to access the cliff. Thanks to this drone, the team can collect clues that were unattainable until now in order to process them in 3D. These previously unseen images, alongside traditional observations made 20 years ago, allow archaeologists to piece together the secrets of the Nabataeans' construction techniques. To sculpt this kind of structure, ancient stone carvers started by smoothing the rock, creating a flat wall which marked out the front of their building.
We are on a raw, rocky facade. They started by making a flat surface, which was used as a board upon which the building was projected.
On this blank canvas of rock, the Nabataeans hollowed out small terraces which allowed them to sculpt the rock face in complete safety.
They started from the top, then prepared a small platform and descended. And they had to finish the top of the building before going down the rock. They couldn't go back to finish it.
After completing the upper parts, workers needed extreme attention to detail as they gradually descended, finishing with the foundations.
The fact that they had to do the whole facade in one go with no chance to restart or to repair a mistake is something very courageous and a risk that nobody could bear today.
In Petra, you need preciseness in engineering. That means if a mistake would go, that means the whole facade is destroyed.
Researchers haven't found any plans or written records about Al-Hasne, but they assume that the Nabataeans planned their construction to the smallest detail.
The builders had to anticipate every volume, project the unbuilt structure onto the rock, and it's this ability to anticipate and plan the project beforehand, which is most impressive for an architect.
At Al-Hasne, the ancient builders erased all traces of their construction as they worked. But taking a step back, we can see evidence that this structure was also built using the inverted construction technique. To the right of the monument, these stairs, discovered at the same time as the site in the 19th century, allowed workers to access their construction site. But a mystery remains. How can this monumental facade stand when it was impossible for the Nabataeans to test the strength of its foundations before they started building? The images taken by drone reveal an immense massif which overlooks Al-Hasne. Hundreds of tons of rocks weigh down on the monument. How could the Nabataeans be sure that these structures wouldn't crumble underneath this immense weight?
One of the principles of construction is that you have to transfer the load from its highest point down to the ground. And when you look at the sculpture, each of the elements, the weight is transferred down to the ground through the column.
At first glance, the support element seems obvious. A monumental lintel held up by 6 immense columns cut directly into the rock face. But appearances can be deceiving. On 19th century engravings, we discovered that one of the load-bearing columns was broken. It wasn't repaired until the 1960s, yet the building didn't collapse. The 3D model of the monument, built using data from the total station, reveals the solution to what holds up the structure. From the side, we realize that the lintel is built into the cliff. So are all of the columns, except for the 2 central ones. So it's the rock wall itself which is supporting most of the weight, and not the facade, which is almost like an optical illusion. The interior of Al-Hasne confirms this hypothesis. Usually, it is closed to the public. But Kais Twesi has special permission to explore inside. Surprisingly, the interior of Al-Hasne is much less spectacular than the outside suggests.
It's looked from outside very huge, and from the interior, small chamber.
One master chamber, 10 meters high and undecorated, leading to 3 much smaller rooms. This transition from gigantic to miniature between exterior and interior shows that the Nabataeans knew about force dynamics and were careful to evaluate the risk of collapse.
You need to triangulate any load in so that it can go over the structure and back down to the earth. And if you hollow it out to too great an extent, it would collapse and it would have brought the facade down with it.
These rooms are small because they had to be careful that the ceiling, the quarry ceiling in a way, wasn't too wide so that the rock can support such a large slab.
These modest rooms pose question about the very nature of Al-Hasne. Even today, experts still can't agree on its exact function.
It is considered a tomb, or it may simply be a cenotaph, a building in memory of the deceased. Considering the site and the quality of the architecture, it was for someone important, probably a king.
One thing is for sure, this structure was designed to impress. It is the first thing you see when entering the site. Thanks to the support of the cliff, the Nabataeans ensured that this spectacular monument would remain standing 2,000 years later. For centuries, Petra has survived many dangers: erosion, earthquakes, enemy attacks. But the city also has to withstand another major challenge, a hazard that's unexpected in the desert.
From this blue sky, it's hard to believe how it's messed up during the winter season.
Between October and January, the city can be hit by torrential rain. And the rain here always starts suddenly.
The other side of this is that there is a danger of flash floods.
In the event of a storm, rainwater flows between gaps in the rock and funnels towards the Seek. This natural gorge can transform into a furious torrent, threatening the entire city, starting with Al-Hasne.
Even in my 12 years here, there were 2 times where you saw the water roll into the center city and wreak havoc. That major boulders moved around, and you realized that people needed to be evacuated out of the city.
In November 2018, 4,000 tourists had to be urgently evacuated to avoid being trapped by devastating mudslides. But what did the Nabataeans do when faced with this danger? To answer this question, archaeologists first looked for clues at the Seek, the narrow gorge that allows access to the city.
The Seek was the weakest point of entire infrastructure of the city of Petra. So they had to protect this paved road from destruction.
During the first excavations in the 19th century, archaeologists discovered an amazing passage carved through the rock. A tunnel 3 meters wide and 5 meters high, leading to a canal.
We are now in the middle of one of the most impressive hydrological structures in Petra. This tunnel was partially cut in the rock 2,000 years ago. This tunnel was associated with another divergent dam that was constructed not far away from it, and both structures were constructed in order to manage the water floods and to prevent them from entering the city.
The dam was built near the city's entrance, diverting water towards the tunnel and away from the Seek. An ingenious solution that prevented the destruction of Petra's jewel. Other dams discovered later completed this protection system. Ahmad Hassana is an expert in digital archaeology. By taking thousands of pictures of the protection system's remains, he has been able to make 3D digital models of 36 individual sites.
We're standing in one of these dams, which is a clear example about how the Nabataeans used to protect their cities from flash floods.
Today, most of the dams have been restored and returned to service.
Nabataean system was re-erected by the Jordanian Department of Antiquities for the protection of people and tourists going into Petra.
It's the first time ever in history of archaeology that I did archaeology not only for curiosity, but to get to know how this system worked and whether it's possible to restore it, that it works again. And that's what I did. It works again.
The system still functions and is proving to be an ingenious feature. Because the Nabataeans faced another major problem: how to supply the city with water all year round when it only rains in winter.
It has 200 millimeters of water a year, whereas in Western Europe we have 900. They needed to harness that.
There is no life without water.
How did the city's 30,000 inhabitants obtain fresh water? And how did they cultivate the land to feed themselves?
The water at Petra has a reliable source up in the mountains, but it is some distance from the city.
Satellite imagery reveals that the closest waterway, the Ain Musa, is situated 9 kilometers away. So how did ancient engineers provide drinking water to the city's inhabitants without a nearby water source or regular rain? The first answer can be found at the dams built to protect the city from flash floods.
So Nabataeans built this, first of all, to protect the city from the flash floods, and then to use the water, to collect the water, because they were very careful and wise to collect every drop of water.
Every drop of rain that trickled down the rock face was channeled and directed into water tanks where it could be stored. There were as many as 200 tanks in the city. Many are still visible to the naked eye, some from high up, others like this one from the ground. But there was a problem. The water that collected in these tanks wasn't drinkable.
It was not only water, it was dung from the birds, it was branches from bushes, it was dry leaves, God knows what. And then the water had to be collected and to still down. And then all the material fell down to the bottom.
In 1999, Uli Bellward carried out tests on the rainwater. The results allowed him to understand how the Nabataeans obtained drinking water. They stored water in a first pool and waited for the waste to sink to the bottom. Then the water flowed into a second pool, followed by a third, controlled by a system of valves.
From the first to the next, and at the end of this filtering process, the water was really clean.
This filtration system made the water cleaner for drinking. But how did it reach the city? The answer can be found here in the Sikh. On either side of this narrow rocky gorge are shallow grooves that Ahmad Hassana thinks were carved by the Nabataeans. One diverted rainwater. The other channeled in spring water from the neighboring mountains.
Actually, there's a complicated system of pipelines to provide the water for every single house. So every single house in Petra get the water like our days.
Thanks to his meticulous digital work, Ahmad was able to compile details of all the discoveries made by previous archaeologists. It allowed him to build a complete map of the complex Nabataeans' hydraulic system. 29 kilometers of pipes and 5 aqueducts that channeled an astonishing 46 million liters of water into the city each day. A change of scale allows us to discover other elements of this stunning hydraulic system. Some of the rock-cut channels retain the faint traces of terracotta pipes.
If we look at close here, we can see that the edge of these pottery pipes, and also we can see how these pipes connected together.
The Nabataeans developed a system of pipes that was highly advanced for the time. Terracotta pipes were embedded into the rock, fixed in place with mortar, and the joints sealed with a waterproof coating.
They made first a clay, like the paste for bread, and then they wrapped this clay paste around a wooden cylinder and fixed the two ends together. And then they were firing these enormous pieces.
These terracotta pipelines preserved the quality of drinking water. But the Nabataeans faced another major problem. How could these pipes withstand enormous pressure created by the steep slope between the source at an altitude of 1,300 meters and the center of the city 500 meters below?
Inside the pipelines, with each % of gradient, the pressure inside the pipeline increases by 1 bar. We know from tests that these terracotta pipes could bear an internal pressure of 9 bars.
With a slope between 4 and 5%, terracotta pipes won't explode, but they still remain 80% filled with water, allowing for a regular flow. This is exactly the angle of the channels discovered in Petra. Through experience, the Nabataeans had managed to determine the perfect angle for their pipeline to withstand the pressure, another feat for the era, while their system of aqueducts and valves let them adjust the flow rate in their hydraulic network. Now, the city could be supplied with sufficient water all year around.
In Petra, the population, which grew to 30,000 people, could rely on being able to drink 8 liters of water a day.
They could rely on about 40,000 cubic meter of water per day, which makes it really incredible. It means that they had water not only for the normal domestic uses, but also for public uses.
The Nabataeans figured out how to transport an incredible volume of water into the middle of the desert. But what could they use this abundance for? In the heart of the city, the study of ruins next to the Great Temple reveals something astonishing. At first glance, these piled slabs and pebbles don't suggest the presence of water. The first archaeologists even thought this was a marketplace. But in 2013, a study of soils on a microscopic scale made it possible to make an incredible discovery.
And through the archaeologist analysis for sand samples, they approved that those samples, they have seeds of palm tree, which is give us the idea that this garden was full of palm tree as the main tree for the garden.
Amongst the grains of sand, scientists found remains of fossilized seeds and plants, which meant that the Nabataeans had mastered irrigation to create lush gardens. And that's not all. By analyzing the ground with georadar, researchers have detected the presence of an enormous pool. Instead of a market, there used to be an incredible aquatic complex here, which today's digital imagery makes it possible to recreate.
Above the garden, there is this unique swimming pool. And this swimming pool is about 44 by 25 meter and about 2 meter the depth. It's actually like the size of Olympic swimming pool nowadays.
An Olympic-sized swimming pool 1 century before Christ. It seems excessive in a desert where water is so precious. But the abundance of water was key to the Nabataeans establishing their power in the region. Water was used to serve the city's splendor.
You have to imagine how impressed the caravans that arrived in Petra would be by the water and the way it was almost wasted just for glory.
The mastery of the water and then creating these cascading fountains and pools, it's basically showing off.
The Nabataeans were originally nomads, caravan drivers. They knew that in the desert, water is the most important source of wealth. And they took full advantage of it.
In terms of the Nabataean economy, it relied heavily on trade.
The main trade that brought the most money was the trade of incense and myrrh.
In ancient times, incense and myrrh were luxurious, rare, and expensive goods. Petra became so rich due to its location at a strategic crossroads.
All of the commodities from Arabia and therefore Yemen passed through this kingdom. Also India, the Red Sea, all of these commodities arrived in Gaza or Alexandria and flooded the Mediterranean market.
They were just at the junction between the Roman world, which had the means and the taste for luxury, and the source countries where the goods were cheap, and thus this economic somersault made them a lot of money.
Today, archaeologists and historians believe that the abundance of water and luxury in the city were key to the success of the Nabataean people.
Petra demonstrates opulence, and people would be drawn from great distances to come and marvel at this society, and also to spend money there. It was a financial mecca, a Las Vegas of its time.
The city stood out as a place of opulence. It was the Dubai or Las Vegas of its time. In Petra, everything was made to dazzle visitors, Al-Hasne as well as other monuments.
This entire valley was densely built. It was covered entirely in buildings, large public buildings, the impressive remains of which we can see, but also between them, every side was occupied by domestic architecture of very high quality, which dates from the era.
You have to imagine that we're in the city centre in ancient times, so you have to recreate in your minds the colonnade streets from antiquity, moments here and there.
Today, scientists are studying the remains of 850 buildings from every angle. They want to understand how the city developed over the centuries. These constructions have suffered the ravages of time much more than those which were carved into the cliffs. However, thanks to new technology, experts can reveal their full splendor. In the heights of the city, at the summit of Jabal Qubtat, a French archaeological mission has taken an interest in these ruins, which were first discovered at the start of last century.
So this is the place? Yeah, that's the place. I think we should stand here.
Archaeologists have long believed that this was a place of worship. To verify this theory, Thibaut Fournet is focused on recreating the entire building. He will use drone photography to achieve his goal.
I need mainly pictures on this main monument, from this angle to this one, on different flight from the top and from the front of the cliff.
By employing a drone to photograph these remains from many different angles, photogrammetry can be used to visualize the dimensions and volumes of the ruined buildings and reveal their architecture.
All these photos gives us an overall coverage of the structure, and photogrammetry software can reconstruct a kind of digital copy of the remains. So this digital model of its current state allows us to have a truly complete description of the remains, a description upon which we can base our restoration and test assumptions about the restoration of architecture on the basis of a three-dimensional model.
Three-dimensional recreations in conjunction with excavation work has revealed a building measuring 225 square meters and composed of 7 rooms. And the research shows something surprising. This wasn't a place of worship, but an incredible spa hanging from the cliff.
Bathers would make the most of the comfort of these thermal baths, as well as an incredible view of the entire city center. It had to be on the cliff edge, not only for the bathers to make the most of the view of the city center, but probably also to be seen.
Thanks to these digital models, Thibaut could even reconstruct the exact path taken by bathers who visited this luxurious spa.
A bather would come this way into a courtyard, then enter the first room of the thermal block, the frigidarium. This room was fitted with a cold swimming pool here, a kind of collective pool, and from here the bathers would continue towards the first heated room, the tepidarium, and from there they went into the caldarium, the structure's main room, which was fitted with 2 heated pools. And these pools were supplied by a reservoir, which supplied the whole structure with water.
According to Thibaut, this layout is typical of the thermal architecture from Latin civilization. The Nabataeans must have built these baths under Roman influence. Historians believe that these invaders took over Petra without a fight. It became a Roman province in 106 AD. Today, scientists are trying to understand how the Romans influenced or even changed the city's architecture.
It is the study of a building's architecture which allows us to understand how the buildings, which had a function in the Nabataean era, were reused by the Roman power, and there are many emblematic edifices which allow us to follow the Roman occupation.
When flying over the site, traces of Roman presence are evident. like this impressive ancient amphitheater, 33 rows of seats, and a 50-meter orchestra area holding 5,000 spectators. But other sites can only be uncovered through the development of complex investigative techniques.
Shall we go up and set up there?
Yes.
For several years, French experts have been investigating one of Petra's most important monuments, the Khazar-el-Bin Temple, literally meaning the castle of the pharaoh's daughter. This building was constructed by the Nabataeans around 30 AD.
For me, it was built from there. There was the same kind of overhang, it all fell down. We'll have to check the colored areas. But where did all those big blocks there come from?
The monument has been severely damaged over time.
On top of earthquakes, the Khazar-el-Bin was subjected to deterioration due to wind erosion. Being a sandstone is a very friable material, we can deduce that the building was inexorably destroyed progressively.
François Renel leads a team of 10 archaeologists supported by 10 Jordanian workers. They are meticulously excavating the ruins of the temple. The team is hunting for traces of the Roman building works.
We made the most of the gaps in the slabs to comprehend its chronology and the different phases of construction present. The works carried out for several years shows that there are two phases of stairs. A first monumental phase, which is linked to the first phase of the temple's construction during the Nabataean period, and a second which corresponds to the embellishment of the temple within the framework of a much vaster imperial program during the 2nd century AD.
The Romans added their own materials to the top of the limestone and sandstone of the Nabataean buildings, materials like white marble, which they considered more precious. Experts believe they changed this Nabataean place of worship into a temple dedicated to the glory of their gods.
We see that the Romans reclaimed the sanctuary, kept it in its Nabataean state, let's say, gradually renovated it, rebuilding parts of the stairs. But while repairing the Nabataean building, they added to the west of the structure a new monumental building, a monument with an altar, which is most likely dedicated to Roman emperors.
The team have carried out a detailed topographical survey of the site, allowing them to recreate the dimensions and volume of the Khazar-el-Bin. Then modeling software could bring these ruins back to life, recreating in 3 dimensions the structure as it looked 2,000 years ago. Thanks to the Roman Empire, Petra experienced glory days once again. But without the architectural genius of the Nabataeans, these constructions would have disappeared long ago, wiped out by earthquakes. To understand how, it's necessary to take to the sky. Satellite imagery reveals the very particular geographical situation of this site. Petra was built over a seismic fault. The city is on the boundary of 2 sliding plates, the African plate and the Arabian plate.
In this area, 2 continental plates are moving. One is shifting below the other, and the other one is shifting over.
As the plates slide over each other, they can cause particularly violent earthquakes.
We think about Petra, we should always remember that there were many earthquakes that influenced the city's history. The biggest one was in May 363 and devastated the center city of Petra.
Here we can see the devastating effects caused by an earthquake, which took place between the 3rd and the 4th century, where we have an upper part of the temple which fell, like these columns, like these parts of a ledge.
Archaeologists have studied the Khazar-el-Bin in an attempt to understand how it could survive centuries in this highly seismic zone. Within the partially destroyed walls, they found a clue, the remains of wood. Some experts think that this is the key to withstanding tremors.
Their engineers, they understood that they needed to deal with the tectonic problems.
The Nabataean engineers had invented one of the first anti-seismic measures in history.
They have this idea that this piece of wood in the middle of the building should control the cracks, the vertical and the horizontal cracks within the building.
Experts think that the framework of wooden beams, made of a more flexible material than the stone around it, absorbs the energy of earthquakes, combating the effects of stress in the walls, the raising of foundations, and even twisting.
somehow it's controlling the balance of the building, which make a smooth movement in the bulks of the building. And this technique, it's actually approved. This is a successful technique.
The Nabataeans had risen to the challenge posed by earthquakes, and they even took some benefit from the phenomenon, because it was seismic activity that created the city's exceptional scenery. In Greek, Petra means stone, and it is this extraordinary raw material that gave its name to the city. But what is so particular about it, and how did the Nabataeans manage to work with it?
It's not possible to understand Petra without understanding its geology.
The nature of the stone in Petra determines its present appearance.
Petra is carved in the natural rock, so it is important to understand the raw material.
Seismic activity allowed the raw building materials used by the Nabataeans to rise to the surface. This is a sedimentary rock called sandstone with very specific properties.
Petra is surrounded by mountains that are made of igneous rock, but Petra itself is sandstone, and sandstone is formed by layers effectively under the sea.
And that means this sandstone is not like granite, a stone which is strong and compact, but it's only like cement. The grains are still the same as they ever were, but they are glued together by lime.
When you observe sandstone under a microscope, you realize that it is composed of millions of compressed grains of sand. This characteristic explains how the stone is so easily cut. To work it, the Nabataeans could resort to relatively basic techniques. Some of their tools even left marks that are studied by scientists today.
What's interesting is that all the walls still have the marks of the tools which they were cut by. And in particular, here's the cut which we call ornamental. With a pick, the stonemason cut all these lines parallel, which allow the creation of a surface, which plays with light.
It shows one way the Nabataeans enhanced the beauty of their landscape. When flying over Petra, the variety of color in the monuments is impressive.
The colors and the design in the bedrock itself, it's very, very impressive.
An extraordinary range which stretches from yellow to purple, as well as pinks, oranges, and reds.
This is the only place where sandstone becomes art.
The colors of Petra are just amazing. You cannot stop looking or gazing at the facades of Petra.
The builders understood that to embellish the city, they could utilize the incredible range of colors that the sandstone naturally offered.
All different colors of sandstone of Petra are visible, each single layer to represent a different chemical composition, depending on the typology of iron oxide which is present inside.
When sandstone forms, it preserves a record of the different types of sand deposited over time. And one element is particularly spectacular.
There's so much embedded quartzite in the sandstone, it refracts the light. And so you get these different color grains within the sand, which through this reflection makes all these different colors and different bands, which brings the sculpture to life. It would be dead without that geological composition.
It's the composition of the sandstone, in part thanks to quartz, that gives the city its splendor. The Nabataeans used the colors of this rock to great effect, but they also suffered from the stone's weaknesses. Because the strength of sandstone varies greatly. By choosing to carve their structures here, the builders were taking a big risk.
The rock has to be good quality. In particular, there can't be any of the faults which are unique to sandstone, which is a rock that's made of different layers that can easily detach.
It's likely that the instability of the rock accounts for the number of construction sites found abandoned here.
We now have investigation tools which allows us to know the nature of the rock and its possible flaws before we begin. And that would probably have avoided what we see in several places of Petra, unfinished tombs.
Even today, the nature of the stone poses a threat to Petra. A team of scientists from UNESCO, led by Giorgia Cesario and Giuseppe Del Monaco, have the delicate task of securing this site and safeguarding this jewel of the desert.
All the monuments are affected by similar factors like wind and water erosion. It's really fundamental for the people who take care of the site to understand this concept in order to act and to prioritize.
The most fragile area is the Sikh, the passage through which 500,000 tourists pass each year.
In May 2009, just in the place where I am, a small stone fell from the top of this cliff, which is one of the highest points in the Sikh itself. And unfortunately, it happened in the night. And so we didn't have any injuries for the visitor. But in May 2015, a big block fell from this cliff. It happened around at 11 o'clock when people was passing through.
Today, new technology like GPS sensors give advanced warnings of this type of accident. 11 dangerous spots have been identified at the Sikh, and Georgia's team, aided by rock climbing specialists, have installed nets in the areas where the rock is most likely to crumble. Then, the team installed a highly sophisticated surveillance system.
On the top of the block, we put a deformometer and a tiltmeter to measure the inclination in time.
This device monitors the rock 24 hours a day, sending alerts to the UNESCO team who can intervene in the event of danger and evacuate the Sikh. Through fieldwork and thanks to digital models, scientists today are trying to bring the ancient city of Petra back to life. For centuries, the city was abandoned, and even the Nabataeans' architectural genius wasn't enough to ensure they would be remembered. This ancient people disappeared in the 7th century, prompting the fall of this superb city. Why did the citizens of this prosperous and busy city abandon Petra and flee?
First of all, it was the diversion of caravan driver commerce via the city of Palmyra in Syria.
There was an economic decline.
The cause of Petra's lost status can be traced 500 kilometers away to the city of Palmyra's rising economic importance. But another disaster played a role too.
The big turning point when damage started again was definitely the earthquake of 363 AD.
All the water system, the cisterns and the aqueducts were damaged heavily and were no longer reconstructed in the future.
The ending of Petra, it will finally come when they no longer maintain those water access points. There is not enough rainfall there to sustain agriculture on the normal basis.
Even the ingenious anti-seismic measures of the Nabataeans weren't enough to save the city from destruction. But some scientists have suggested another theory, that in 400 AD, the city fell victim to a different tragedy. By analyzing the ground of the town's main road, they discovered the presence of unusual white sand, totally different to the local red or orange sand.
There was a very irregular event which deposited white sand in amongst the buildings of Petra. And that could only have come from an area some distance away from Petra. So it was a monumental flood which happened, and it could well have destroyed the entire population, certainly in the center of the city.
But today, this theory is disputed because signs of life and even subsequent building work have been discovered in Petra.
Several discoveries of urban sites from the Byzantine era show that after the 4th century earthquake, life continued.
So life went on, but it did not go on as rich or as strong as before.
These Byzantine churches, with their famous mosaics, are the final glorious chapter of a city which is thought to have finally sunk into oblivion in the 7th century AD. The lost city of Petra was only rediscovered in the beginning of the 19th century by a Swiss explorer. Since then, this marvel of architecture has been observed from every angle and on every scale by hundreds of scientific missions, revealing new parts of the city's history.
By exploring the site in areas visited by tourists, we're still discovering more architectural remains, whilst coming out of the ground sculpted ruins which have never been seen or interpreted.
We know only 6% of the town, so that gives you an idea of the work we have left to do.
We only have glimpses of the Nabataeans. We only have glimpses of their glorious city, capital city.
Piece by piece, the secrets of the city's construction have been revealed through meticulous work on all scales, but mysteries still endure. So for now, this pink city of the desert will remain the perfect playground for archaeologists, architects, and hydraulic engineers, all passionate about the incredible heritage left by the Nabataeans. In Asia, in the heart of the biggest continent on the planet, traversing an entire country from east to west, the Great Wall of China. Constructed on rocky ridges at an altitude of more than 1,000 meters, this remarkable structure is the largest ever built by man in terms of length, mass, and surface area.
It's majestic, it is imposing.
It's the largest man-made structure on the planet.
It is incredible.
This marvel of the ancient world was built from nearly 4 billion bricks. To the 16 million tourists who visit each year, only a short 80-kilometer section near Beijing is well known. But when observed by satellite, we discovered that this wall, also known as the Dragon, crosses no fewer than 15 Chinese provinces.
It would take 2 years walking from one end of the wall to another. So that just gives you an idea of the scale.
It's the endless wall, the wall without end.
While the human eye can't detect the full extent of this incredible construction, the latest technology allows experts to calculate the true length of the wall by detecting hidden portions of it.
We found several new sections of wall which had never been discovered before.
Now, intact walls dating back 2,000 years have been discovered, and new technology is exposing a construction technique that shows the genius of ancient builders.
This technique makes it possible to transform the earth into stone. It's an incredible technique.
By examining the wall from a satellite scale down to a molecular level, today's experts seek to dissect the techniques of yesterday's builders. They aim to unravel the mysteries of this jewel of humanity and use the newest science to find the truth behind its construction.
It becomes more and more solid over time.
They became virtually impenetrable, even to cannonballs.
Thanks to the latest technology, we can lift the veil on the extraordinary construction methods of this UNESCO World Heritage Site by scanning the walls, surveying its depth, and taking to the sky.
Building a wall like this at such a high altitude, it's a true feat of architecture.
What revolutionary techniques allow the Chinese to construct thousands of kilometers of wall in under 70 years and on such steep terrain? And what secret ingredient, recently revealed by science, explains its unbelievable longevity?
A brick is a brick, or so I thought. But no, these bricks are exceptional.
History, science, construction, examined like never before. The Great Wall of China reveals its secrets on every scale. The Great Wall of China's world fame owes a lot to its unique form. Snaking through the mountains of northern China, this incredible structure was built to protect the Chinese Middle Kingdom from Mongolian attacks. But what visitors can't see at first glance is the true extent of this engineering feat, constructed over 2,000 years.
It is the longest man-made monument on Earth, and it is colossal.
It almost transcends nature because it crosses very inhospitable terrain. It goes across deserts, over mountains to the sea.
Over thousands of kilometers, it doesn't exist anywhere else.
For more than a century, archaeologists and explorers have traveled across most of Asia, following the wall by foot in order to chart this jewel of humanity. Now experts can use the latest technology, like spatial imaging, to observe the extent of this Chinese monument and visualize it like never before on a satellite scale. It crosses the wild plains of the western Gobi Desert, snakes through the northern mountains, and finally plunges into the Yellow Sea in northeast China. The wall is so vast that, at its eastern end, the sun rises a full 1 hour and 20 minutes later than at its western extremity. The length of this wall was long calculated using observations taken by the naked eye. In 2012, it was estimated at 6,700 kilometers long, a little more than the length of China. But now, thanks to new technology like drones and radar systems on a satellite scale, archaeologists have the means to explore a new hypothesis, that the wall's true length is much greater. Today, investigators think that many parts of the Great Wall of China are invisible to the naked eye, that sections have become hidden underground or destroyed over the centuries and have not been added to the total length of the wall. It's a hypothesis backed up by the study of ancient texts, and also by a very particular expression from the Chinese language.
The Chinese refer to the Great Wall as, in Chinese, 1 li chang chang.
1 li, which means 10,000 leagues, is a way of saying that something is extremely big, even immeasurable.
It's not an absolute measurement. When the Chinese speak in terms of numbers, they signify certain things. For example, 100 means many. 1,000 means a great multitude. 10,000 is almost an eternal figure. So 1 li, the 10,000 miles, means it's the endless wall, the wall without end.
But beyond the myth, how many kilometers of this endless wall will be revealed? What is the real length of this incredible fortification? This wall, which is also known as the Dragon. Determined to use all of the latest technology to reassess the length of the monument, in 2007, China appealed to the country's experts. For 5 long years, Xu Yujun led a team that investigated the entire territory in search of an answer.
Determining the length of the wall is very complicated work, because in most cases there are several superimposed layers.
This military fortification, whose history started over 2,000 years ago, has regularly been repaired or rebuilt over the centuries. So, to accurately determine the total length of the wall, Xu Yujun focused on tracking down missing portions, hunting for sections now destroyed or underground. This Herculean task to find areas invisible to the human eye was facilitated by the latest digital technology.
After having located visible portions of the remains, we then used the GPS to rebuild the portions of destroyed wall.
Then, on an airborne scale, the use of remote sensing took over. By flying over areas determined by the archaeologists, radars swept the ground to establish a precise location for every centimeter of the wall it found. The technology emits electromagnetic waves towards the Earth, which are reflected back to the transmitter, revealing remains that were invisible to the naked eye in remote areas of the Gobi Desert.
We found several new sections of wall which had never been discovered before. 6 or 7 years ago, this allowed us to define the Great Wall's new starting point, thanks to a new portion of wall found in the desert. It was much further than what the archives mentioned to begin with.
Now, satellite imagery allows for the visualization of the results of this huge mapping project. When seen from the sky, the discovery is astonishing. It is not one single wall, but many spread across the whole of China.
According to our investigation, there are about no fewer than 40,000 sections.
The wall is not a long, steady river, if I can use that expression. It's anything but a single line, even if it is winding. It was several ramparts over certain places in China.
There are many sections of the wall which are to the north or to the south of the Ming Wall as we know it, and this is due to its historical composition.
Portions from different eras, which added together in 2012, revealed the true length of the wall.
The length we have assessed today is 21,196 kilometers in total.
Over 21,000 kilometers. That's 4 times more than the 6,700 kilometers previously calculated. An immense number, which makes the Great Wall of China easily the longest monument in the world.
To actually arrive at a figure of 21,000 kilometers is something that no other country can match. A fit person, it would take them 2 years, walking 8 hours a day from one end of the wall to another. So that just gives you an idea of the scale.
To put that in perspective, the circumference of the globe is round about 40,000 kilometers. So that would stretch halfway around the world. That is amazing.
As well as revealing the extraordinary length of the wall, the radar measurements allowed the discovery of portions of the wall built no less than 1,600 years before the parts near Beijing that are best known to the general public. But what did these 1,000-year-old, totally unknown portions of the Great Wall look like? And what materials and techniques did the first builders use to make them? To discover these mysterious remains, we have to head 2,500 kilometers northwest of Beijing to the gates of Mongolia and the Gobi Desert. It is here that archaeologists, with the help of satellite radars, rediscovered the oldest remains of the Great Wall of China. Fortifications which measured up to 9 meters in height.
Since the last discoveries, we have brought to light no less than 168 kilometers of new portions of the wall. What's surprising is that a third of the walls are still in good condition.
To better understand why this result is surprising, we have to shift to a microscopic scale to better understand the composition of these walls. They are made of compacted earth and sand.
For us, we think of a wall as stone and brick. Most of the wall was built on beaten earth, with additives which, incidentally, are sometimes secret.
So, what is the first secret construction technique that allowed these 2,200-year-old structures to withstand over 22 centuries of war, wind, and this desert's extreme temperatures? First of all, it is traditional excavation work which allowed archaeologists to analyze these ancient walls. But now, thanks to 3D modeling techniques, it is possible to visualize the wall like never before. The wall was composed of different layers formed of materials from the region, layers of compacted earth interspersed with dried reeds. Computer modeling allows scientists to better understand the first builders' construction methods. But to confirm or disprove their hypothesis, they made giant models for real. At this construction site, investigators want to reveal the secret of the wall's longevity.
To build the wall, you first frame the earth with wooden molds. You then add the earth and the layers of reeds, and to finish, you tamp it down.
It's a very, very simple technology. You use a wooden former that's fixed in place.
To be able to frame the wall,
you mix up the earth, the sand, the gravel with some water in situ. And each layer has to be pounded down to compress it, and it's that compression that gives it its strength.
3D modeling techniques allow the visualization of the compression effect on the earth. On a microscopic scale, it removes pockets of air, allowing the material to become more compact and solid. But for scientists, this ancient construction method, known as rammed earth, doesn't fully explain how these walls were so robust. So how was this earth transformed into a material as hard as stone, capable of standing for over 2 millennia? The answer to this mystery is revealed on a satellite scale. At this scale, remains can be located 100 kilometers from the Los Plateau, a plateau which bears the name of the very fine sand which covers it. Sand is scattered by the winds to the level of the wall. On a microscopic scale, researchers discovered that 20% of it was composed of clay, but there was more. On a molecular scale, they identified a very particular molecule, calcium carbonate.
Calcium carbonate, which exists on the Earth's surface as limestone, as chalk, as seashells, and also as snail shells. When it breaks down, it acts as a cement in the formation of mortars. And in the Gobi Desert, you actually see snail shells which were crushed and broken down and added to the mortar to give it this additional strength, this reinforcing otherwise would not have.
The unique composition of the Los Plateau, with its clay soil and small shells, is one of the builder's secrets. Once ground up by hammer, the shells let out calcium carbonate, a hydraulic binder which, once dried, acquires an extraordinary resistance comparable to that of cement.
Calcium carbonate is like lime, which is ground up limestone, which turns solid again when it's humidified.
It dries out and it's as solid, it's almost as solid as concrete.
But on its own, it wouldn't have sufficient strength to be able to withstand the elements or withstand attack.
The discovery at the microscopic scale that loose sand contains molecules of calcium carbonate exposes one of the secrets to the wall's extraordinary resistance. But it is on a human scale, by carrying out excavations in the field, that experts discovered another clue to explain the wall's incredible longevity. Today, it's possible to visualize the results in 3D. The layers of earth were poured like concrete around long rows of reeds. But why did the Chinese choose this particular plant material? And what is its role?
So the Chinese used water reeds to reinforce the wall. And this acted like the steel mesh that we use in concrete today.
The layer of reeds is part of the wall's foundation. Not only is it used to reinforce it, but also to make it more supple. The primary function of these reeds is to make the wall sturdy, but their second function is just as important, ventilating the walls.
These earth walls have a weakness. They absorb humidity. By carrying out simulations of the reed's function, 3D imagery allows researchers to confirm their hypothesis and reveal that the reeds had a double role. This hollow plant material reinforces the walls, but also ventilates them.
And alternate layers of these reeds would create this sort of tensile strength, which made the wall very strong. But because the reeds were hollow, if the wall got wet, it would not stay wet because the air would circulate and dry the reeds. Otherwise, they would rot.
These observations reveal the genius of the ancient builders. Without modern technology, they located clay sand in the desert to successfully build a solid, reinforced structure capable of self-ventilation. An incredibly resistant wall that would withstand wars and harsh weather.
One of the enduring qualities of the Great Wall is that whilst it uses very resilient materials, it also is flexible and it's permeable and it can accommodate ground movements, seasonal movements, and it's far more resilient than a rigid structure would be today.
And what you're left with is this huge wall that is so strong that you could get in a bulldozer and take a run up, but it's not going to go anywhere. You're just going to hit a brick wall, effectively, except it's a rammed earth wall.
This technique makes it possible to virtually transform the earth into stone. It's an incredible technique.
The latest technology has shed new light on the hidden face of the Great Wall. In total, over 10,000 kilometers of wall and earthen fortifications of extraordinary strength. A strength that proved essential when the Chinese Middle Kingdom was faced with repeated attacks from the north. Whether the territory crossed deserts, plains, or mountains, the Chinese needed a speed of construction that was unprecedented. The most striking example can be found near Beijing. Here, the Ming Dynasty built from the 15th century no fewer than 8,500 kilometers of wall in a record time of only 70 years. At the time, the Middle Kingdom had to face the worst assailants it had ever known, the Mongolians. As a consequence, builders were obliged to urgently find revolutionary techniques to construct thousands of kilometers of wall at lightning speed.
During the Ming Dynasty, there was this impatience, this urgency to build the wall very quickly.
Building a wall like this so quickly was a true feat of architecture.
So, how did Ming builders succeed in constructing their wall in just a few decades? What secrets is this fortification hiding that explains the incredible speed of its construction? Today, the latest technology proves invaluable for research. Like many archaeologists, Su Yunjun's team usually works on the ground. But since 2018, the use of drones has allowed her to better understand the structure of the Great Wall of China and help solve the mystery of the incredible speed of its construction.
The idea of building the Great Wall is actually to adapt to local conditions, to follow the mountain range. A great advantage of drones is that they can film where humans cannot go.
Covered by vegetation and difficult to access because of the dizzying heights, many collapsed portions of the wall are almost impossible to explore through traditional means. Now, thanks to this drone, equipped with sophisticated cameras, researchers can learn more about these dangerous areas and capture tiny details on an aerial scale.
This method is more effective than surveillance by the human eye. I can film just about anywhere.
In a few places which were either not rebuilt at all or which were simply abandoned. In those parts, archaeologists can very clearly see the outline of the wall, so they can reconstruct how high it must have been, how wide.
The drone is capable of covering the full site on an aerial scale. It's equipped with multiple cameras that record an immense amount of data. By processing the data with powerful artificial intelligence programs, researchers can recreate the crumbled walls in 3D and analyze the structure of each portion.
Since I started my research, I have learned a great deal of information about the Great Wall. And in certain cases, it wasn't at all what I had imagined.
Today, three-dimensional imagery lets researchers detect precious clues which could explain the rapid speed of these walls' construction. To the naked eye, this monumental structure seems to be cut into the rock because of its gray-blue color. But analyzing scans of the wall shows its true nature and the materials from which it's made.
The Ming walls look from afar as if they were built with rocks.
When you look closely, you see that it's broken down into component parts which are human scale.
We notice that there are some stone foundations which can be seen, but most of the wall is, in fact, made up of bricks.
3D images reveal the structure of this incredible fortification. The Ming builders chose to use granite, but only for the foundations. On top, to accelerate the process of construction, they decided to use bricks to build a gigantic facade. This was their primary technique to quickly build enormous parts of the wall.
There is no shortage of rocks, natural rocks, because most of the territory that is being used is mountainous. So they could have chiseled out large stone blocks. However, to get them into a square size, into a rectangular size, would have taken a lot of time.
These bricks were preferred to stone because they were easier to build with and had another advantage. Ming builders could create large bricks that helped accelerate the speed of construction. By using 3D modeling to compare the size of a classic brick to the size of a brick made for this Chinese monster, the difference becomes clear.
They made their bricks 4 times the size of normal bricks. So you are increasing your output of material by 4 times.
It's a brick which can weigh up to 10 kilos. It also allows for portions of wall to be made faster, and finally they fit together more simply than very small bricks do.
This ingenious trick helped builders to construct an impressive 8,500 kilometer of wall in only 70 years. Today, scientists are investigating the Ming engineers' extraordinary exploits. Thanks to drones and artificial intelligence, they can deduce the incredible number of bricks assembled over the entire length of the wall.
It's been calculated that the bricks that have been used to build the Great Wall of China, total, it's just shy of 4 billion. That is an incredible amount of bricks.
There's no doubt that these bricks, end to end, could go around the planet 2 or 3 times.
Billions of bricks, which on a microscopic scale reveal that they are 75% composed of clay, a material which is malleable and easy to work with.
You also have to envision the conditions at the time. There was a desire to make something quickly, and also something with the materials of the regions which were crossed.
So, where did the builders obtain the billions of tons of clay necessary to rapidly construct so many kilometers of wall? To solve this mystery, a bird's eye view is necessary to observe the Chinese landscape on a satellite scale. The Ming Wall, fixed atop rocky ridges, is situated only a few kilometers from steep and narrow valleys. 3D modeling techniques allows the visualization of the territory's geology and makes it possible to detect information which is invisible to the naked eye. At the foot of the mountains, a cross-section of ground reveals large reserves of clay situated between earth and rock at a depth of 1 meter.
It's part of the local geology, but there's still vegetation which is fixed on this terrain. So the Mings ripped out the vegetation and directly attacked the layer of clay which was there.
In the interest of efficiency, Ming builders formed bricks using the raw material located at the site, the clay from the foot of the mountains. But how did they cook billions of bricks in record time? Part of the answer is found in the small town of Bangchangyu, 300 kilometers from Beijing. Gowatsu is one of the descendants of the builders who came to the south of China to construct this large part of the Great Wall. A wall which today has mostly been knocked down.
Our ancestors built the Great Wall of China, so seeing it in this state breaks my heart.
To honor the memory of his ancestors, Gowatsu directs an astounding restoration project on behalf of the Chinese government. His work site is located in a valley at the foot of the Great Wall, where reserves of clay used by the Ming can still be found. During preparatory excavations, his team of experts made a remarkable discovery: countless ovens hidden under the earth.
The ovens are underground and they are very particular. They are round. We call them horseshoe ovens. According to the archives, there were 20 people per oven, and in total, there were 271 brickworks.
On a satellite scale, we can visualize the full extent of this discovery. hundreds of ovens all situated in the valley directly next to the source of clay. The proximity reduced the time of production and sped up their transport to the wall.
The ancient brickworks were always situated close to the Great Wall. It saved on labor because it was people who carried the bricks to the top.
The kilns were firing 5,000 to 10,000 bricks at a time. So you can just imagine that the whole area where they were firing bricks would be like the Industrial Revolution.
By setting up the production site at the foot of the mountain, the Chinese were able to build thousands of kilometers of wall in only a few decades. But they also developed a revolutionary method for baking bricks that allowed them to supply the construction site faster. Today, at the restoration site near Bonchongyu, the techniques developed by the Ming are recreated to mold and bake giant bricks identical to those used in the Great Wall of China. The technique takes time, 2 weeks of drying in the sun and no fewer than 48 hours of baking. To speed up production, builders found an ingenious way to save time during the last stage, when the bricks needed to be cooled after baking.
When you fire a brick kiln, when you shut the fires out, there's 2 or 3 days where you wait until the bricks are cool enough to be able to handle. So what the engineers discovered was that on the top of the kiln, if you dig this little moat, fill it with water, it allows them to cool down much more quickly without cracking.
The efficient cooling technique developed by the Ming had an unexpected effect on the color of the bricks.
The bricks on the Great Wall are a uniform grey colour, and that is unusual in an area where the clay fires at a terracotta red colour.
The unusual color is a result of the cold water poured onto the hot ovens to cool them down more quickly.
The other thing it does is it creates steam, and it creates steam in the kiln to the point where fresh air can't get in. So that means that the iron that is contained within the clay can't oxidize.
At that moment, the chemical reactions are not the same, and the iron oxides become grayish.
Through observations on a microscopic scale, scientists discovered an explanation to the unique color of the bricks. The red clay contains iron oxide, which turns red upon contact with air. But reduced oxygen levels inside the oven resulted in the bricks staying gray, like stone.
It stays this greyish-blue colour, and it's quite distinctive.
The Chinese weren't trying to create grey bricks, they were trying to get them out quicker, but by accident they discovered that you can change the colour of the clay by taking the oxygen out.
Through a physical reaction caused by the accelerated cooling of ovens, Ming builders changed the face of the Great Wall of China forever. Thanks to the incredible speed of production, they successfully made billions of bricks to construct thousands of kilometers of wall in only a few centuries. But once the wall had been built, engineers faced a new challenge: to resist repeated assaults by the Mongolians, who were increasingly well armed.
In fact, gunpowder was used to try and dislodge the stones and tear down the walls, but with no success. So they had extremely strong walls.
They became virtually impenetrable, even to firearms, to cannonballs, which were being used from the 16th century onwards.
How did the Ming give their fortification its extraordinary resistance? And what secret ingredients did they hide in the heart of the walls to allow its incredible longevity? According to specialists, the secret to the strength of China's Great Wall can be found within its bricks.
They were very, very high technology, even by today's standards. I mean, a brick is a brick, or so I thought. But no, these bricks are exceptional.
And they are extremely hard.
The analysis of ancient texts, coupled with the recent discoveries of hundreds of ovens, have brought to light the technical revolution developed here in the 16th century. This traditional research work allowed the investigators of the past to analyze the revolutionary ovens used by Ming builders. But today, the latest 3D modeling technology lets experts visualize the inside of the ovens too. Buried at a depth of several meters, they were covered with a round roof under which the bricks were placed. By reproducing the exceptional mastery of fire from the 16th century, archaeologists have discovered the recipe that allows these bricks to be particularly resistant.
Baking is the most delicate stage because you have to control the fire well in order for the bricks to be baked correctly.
Managing the fires, managing the increase in temperature is perhaps the most difficult thing of fire in a brick kiln.
Baking bricks directly in the fire could make them burst. So the goal of ancient builders was to produce constant and durable heat in their ovens. After being dried in the sun, the bricks were placed one on top of the other with enough space between them to let the heat through. But how were they baked without being burned? Archaeologists' research, coupled with 3D imagery, allows them to better understand heat management in this horseshoe-shaped oven, as well as the role of a strangely rounded earth roof. In fact, the fire wasn't underneath the bricks, but next to it, in a tunnel which served as an inlet for hot air. The shape of the oven forced the heat between the bricks and out through the chimney. So, the baking, which approached 1,000 degrees Celsius, was particularly even.
They elevated brick-making technology to a level that you don't see today.
These are very hard bricks which can be reused many times. So in other words, the Ming had actually perfected the art of the burning of bricks to the extent that it became a military secret.
The brickworks were guarded 24 hours a day by the Ming army and worked constantly to produce thousands of extremely resistant bricks weighing up to 10 kilos. Nearly 4 billion of these bricks were carried up the mountain to build the wall. But inside, workers had hidden a secret ingredient, invisible to the naked eye. An essential element that gives the entire structure its incredible strength.
These bricks are there not only to provide the structure, but to contain the core of the wall.
So, what is hidden inside the Great Wall of China? Imagery taken by drones reveals precious clues. In the middle of the mountains, open parts of the wall make it possible to analyze the composition of the heart of this World Heritage Site. On a macroscopic scale, we discover rock, and in particular, granite, a very dense and hard material.
These stones are resistant to sun, wind, whatever their size, large and small. So they were placed inside the wall throughout the construction.
But why didn't the builders choose to construct the entire width of the wall in brick?
You wouldn't use premium materials in locations you didn't need to. So the bricks and the stone create the face or the skin of the wall. And inside is the rubble, which is carved out of the rock in preparing the foundation. There's earth, which is displaced when you're digging down into the clay for the bricks. So all the material is used.
Today, by modeling the monument, investigators can detect the invisible and expose the inside of this gigantic fortification. Above the granite slabs, the Ming packed rubble made up of granite and earth. Then stone slabs were used to seal the structure.
So an entire mountain was easily sufficient to construct a very high and imposing fortification. Very difficult to access, with slightly inclined walls.
Once this had been attained, it became almost impenetrable.
This ingenious technique was used to build a wall of immense dimensions, over 7 meters high and even reaching 12 meters at the lookout towers which punctuate the fortification. Steep-sided walls of breathtaking longevity whose incredible resistance is due to a final secret ingredient. An ingredient recently revealed by science. As well as gathering structural data about this gigantic fortification, Drone technology allows the visualization of the wall like never before thanks to new sensors. These sensors allow investigators to determine every material used in the wall and unravel the mystery of its strength.
The data depends on the capacity of the sensors.
The first innovative technology fixed to the drone is infrared thermography. This equipment can see through cloud and fog to highlight the changes in temperature of different materials, revealing it through a special color scheme.
So the lighter it is, the hotter it is?
Yes.
Once analyzed by a heat technician, this imagery gives precious information about the materials used.
Different materials send different thermal information. In this case, we provide data on the state of the aging of the bricks. If, for example, we add a hyperspectral sensor, we can pick up an extra 100 wavelengths.
Attached to the drone, the hyperspectral sensor records rays, invisible to the naked eye by interpreting the intensity of infrared signals that reach the camera on a level which has never been attained before. To the naked eye, or with a normal camera, we can make out the colors of the material. But with the hyperspectral sensor, scientists can see the chemical components of the wall.
In this case, we can detect the components materials and the percentage in clay, for example. Or if the wall contains cement, we can see everything here. We can do precise analysis of the components of the bricks, the mortar, or the construction of the Great Wall.
Thanks to this data, scientists can compare the chemical composition of each portion of the wall. And it has allowed them to make a startling revelation about the ancient builders' biggest construction secret. Researchers have observed that mortar, which was used by the Ming to cover bricks over 600 years ago, seems to have an extraordinary chemical composition. This unique mortar blends both non-organic compounds like rock or sand with a mysterious organic compound.
The Ming dynasty, not only were they building with these beautiful blue bricks, but they also had a secret ingredient used in the mortar between those bricks.
They're actually sealed by a kind of concrete, which makes them impenetrable against human attacks, but then also against the elements.
In the mountains, you get temperatures which drop down minus 30, minus 40, and it needs a much more resilient mortar.
So, what secret ingredient did the builders use to give the wall its incredible longevity? In the field, archaeologists discovered a material that was strangely white. The color, associated with the mortar's indestructible reputation, has spawned a macabre legend.
We imagined that the dead workers could have been buried inside the wall.
Contemporary sources demonstrate that there was a belief that people were actually buried in the wall, or the bones were ground up to make mortar. So far, no bone fragments have actually been found within the wall itself.
During all of the years of restoration, we have never found a single bone, except for animal bones. Soldiers hunted to improve their living conditions, so they left the animal bones here. Those were the bones that we found here, not human ones.
So, if human bones weren't used to build the wall, what secret ingredient made it so robust? The analysis of samples on a microscopic scale told experts that the mortar was made out of sand, rock, and lime, a material made of calcium carbonate. But at first glance, nothing reveals the organic component detected by infrared. In order to reproduce ancient techniques, during his restoration of the Great Wall, Goatsu took a particular interest in his builder ancestors' secret recipe.
Here, we can see that the brick fell and broke, but the mortar stayed intact. To uncover its secret, we're going to take a sample and send it to be analyzed in a laboratory.
After centuries of legend, science now has the means to unravel the secrets of this wall's construction by analyzing material on a molecular scale. In the south of Shanghai, at the University of Zhejiang, Dr. Zhang's team patiently studied the samples of mortar in their laboratory. The mission of this material specialist is to find the origin of the organic molecule contained in the mortar using an iodine-based chemical test.
We add a drop of iodine to see if the sample changes color. If it turns blue or red-brown, it will indicate that the sample contains starch.
This scientific test proves that starch, a molecule that can generally be found in plants, is present in this sample. But where does this mysterious ingredient come from?
We carried out a precise analysis and found that it contains sticky rice.
Dr. Zhang's research revealed the Chinese builders' secret. They used an ingredient from their daily diet to create one of the world's most unusual mortars.
And that was sticky rice. And the ingredient, what makes the rice sticky, this was used in the water.
Rice releases water in which starch can be found. We noticed that starch improves the material's resistance by reacting with lime.
The latest 3D modeling technology makes it possible to examine the exceptional properties of sticky rice mortar on a molecular scale. Starch is composed of a molecule called amylopectin, which has long branches that trap molecules of calcium carbonate contained in lime, preventing them from crystallizing. Because the crystals are much smaller than in an ordinary mortar, they are more strongly bonded and incredibly resistant.
According to the tests, we found that a mortar composed of 2% to 5% sticky rice is more resistant to compression, to force, and with a more tolerant surface, which indeed improves its resistance to water and air.
Scientists also discovered that the Great Wall of China's mortar is sturdy on the outside and soft and supple on the inside. An extraordinary characteristic which has allowed the wall to resist extreme temperatures over the centuries, as well as earthquakes and even cannon fire. In addition to making the mortar resistant, starch protects the molecules of lime, restricting their contact with any air inside the mortar. When the hard lime erodes onto the surface, the soft lime behind it solidifies, adding to the wall's exceptional longevity.
When the walls erode, for example because of an earthquake, the part which is exposed to air continues to transform into calcium carbonate. By this means, the eroded part reforms and solidifies again. This incredible display is called automatic restoration.
According to scientists, sticky rice mortar is one of the Chinese civilization's major inventions.
Is what is possibly the first known composite mortar. So it's the first known mortar that uses both inorganic compounds like rocks or sand with organic compounds, rice flour.
If you ask me how effective sticky rice mortar is, as time passes, it becomes more sturdy. Cement decomposes over time. Sticky rice mortar gets harder over time. It's remarkable. It's brilliant work.
Decade after decade, the latest technology has unraveled many of the Great Wall's mysteries. Like its true length, at 21,196 kilometers, a large part of which has lasted millennia, thanks to a structure made of rammed earth and layers of reeds. And scientific analysis has shown how clay bricks and composite mortar is the explanation for the resistance of the most well-known sections of the wall. But researchers think there are still secrets to uncover.
It's only recently that we're really starting to look at exactly how the Great Wall has been made up. And I think there's so much more to discover.
Archaeologists are still hunting for missing sections of the Great Wall that remain lost underground. And the search is already provoking debate about its official 21,000-kilometer length.
Personally, I think the number is even higher. I think that it is about 50,000 kilometers if we add up all of the pieces of wall built here or there in China over millennia.
It is as great as the greatest natural phenomenon on Earth. It is like the roof of the world. It's like the Himalayas. Here is something that humans created.
This is a monument in harmony with nature, snaking across steep terrain and still making specialists wonder about the technical and human means used to build it.
There are certain places along the wall we can't reach, so we still have no idea how they built some of the towers.
How the logistics were coordinated over thousands of years to maintain this momentum building the wall. To me, that is a very great mystery.
In Peru, in the heart of the Andean mountains, built at an altitude of 2,430 meters on a rocky ridge, surrounded by steep rain-swept cliffs, stands the city of Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu is the most impressive living testimony of Inca civilization.
It's absolutely breathtaking.
It's a moment of wow of emotion, which repeats itself every time.
Frequented by over 800,000 visitors each year, this Inca city, built in the middle of the 15th century at the height of the Inca Empire, remains in the eyes of many this civilization's most amazing and enigmatic urban creation.
From an engineering point of view, we just have to stand back and say, that's really impressive.
So as an architect, I really wish that I can have like a time machine and go back in time and see how they did it.
Today, with the help of new technology, experts can turn back the clock by probing the invisible and exploring what is hidden beneath and around the city to expose its secrets.
To understand the magnitude of Machu Picchu, we'll have to see it from very high above.
What we don't see is that 60% is underground.
How did extraordinary Inca civil engineering overcome the most violent natural threats and transform this extreme terrain into the empire's most famous city?
It is the challenge of man against nature.
Settling here was extremely risky.
What are the construction secrets behind these unshakable buildings? What do these iconic terraces hide? What amazing astronomical engineering are these massive stones concealing? And what is left to be discovered about Machu Picchu in its most impenetrable areas?
Machete.
It's here, isn't it?
Thanks to advances in technology, Machu Picchu is revealing itself to today's experts in extraordinary new ways. Surveying the depth of the mountain, scanning from above, and exploring the ruins, they will share their most recent discoveries and allow us to enter areas of the site never before seen by the public.
It's unique and is the only one of its kind still standing up in the whole Inca Empire.
Exploration, science, construction. Examined close up and from space alike, Machu Picchu strips down and reveals itself on every scale. Declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1983, the incredible sanctuary of Machu Picchu covers 32,592 hectares of mountainous slopes, peaks, and valleys embedded in the heart of Peru's tropical rainforest. But it's just one small part of this immense site that is well known to the world, the breathtaking city of almost 200 buildings built in 1450 at the height of the Inca Empire.
The site of Machu Picchu itself is 32,000 hectares. It's an enormous site, and each visitor covers only about 700 meters.
The nuclear part of Machu Picchu is what we see. But within 5 kilometers, there are other sites that probably in the master plan of the Incas were going to be integrated to Machu Picchu.
Today, most people only know about a tiny fraction of the entire Machu Picchu site. For more than a century, since the rediscovery of the city in 1911, explorers and scientists focused their research on the heart of the citadel, the area's most recognizable part. But now, investigators have the means to carry out their studies and focus their research on areas which have remained invisible to the eyes of its visitors until today. The goal of this exploration work is to solve a series of intriguing mysteries, the first one being, what secrets are hidden in the remote terrain surrounding the city? What is the true extent of this extraordinary sanctuary?
In order to understand the magnitude of Machu Picchu, its position, and its relationship with all the other sites, we'll have to see it from very high above.
To comprehend the extent of this famous Inca sanctuary and better understand the archaeologists' groundwork, first, it is necessary to get a bird's-eye view and use satellite imagery to visualize Machu Picchu's position on different scales. From above, we discover Machu Picchu at the summit of a mountain with the same name, then the mountain at the heart of the Peruvian Andes, and finally, its location within the Inca Empire, and the empire's gigantic network of ancient roads which traverse no fewer than 6 modern-day countries, from the south of Colombia to the tip of Chile and Argentina, weaving through the most important Inca sites. Experts believe that the number of roads linking a city to this immense network could reveal the site's importance. This is why a large part of recent excavation work at Machu Picchu has been devoted to the exploration of new segments of road which would link the city to the rest of the sanctuary and to the empire.
It was once thought that Machu Picchu was isolated, but then the road network was discovered.
In a yearly basis, we find new roads or new segments of roads during our explorations within the sanctuary borders.
And it is absolutely incredible. It is a network that spans the entirety of the empire.
To find and clear these new trails in the heart of the rainforest, the site's official archaeologists first rely on traditional methods of work. They start by collecting information about the potential presence of sections of road, by studying historical documents and interviewing the local population who know the terrain well. Once this information has been collected and areas of special interest identified, they swap traditional groundwork for new technology which operates at an aerial scale. This is LIDAR, a technology which uses airborne lasers.
LIDAR helps us tremendously. Without it, we would have to roam the jungle blindly with a machete, without truly knowing if there is something to be found underneath the trees.
LIDAR allows for reconnaissance work before exploring the ground. Fixed to a plane, helicopter, or drone, the device scans an area defined by experts. It emits light beams that it sends towards the ground. These beams pass through tiny gaps in the vegetation. When they reach the ground, they are reflected back to the transmitter, recording the terrain's contours. LIDAR makes it possible to confirm the presence and precise location of sections of road.
The use of technology is very important. This exploration work and archaeological excavations allow us to discover new structures.
Nowadays, after the latest 2014 discoveries, we have 9 roads that arrive to Machu Picchu.
Everyone knows the Inca Trail. It's the most traveled path. But others exist, which lead to the city from other places.
They are all connecting Machu Picchu with all the other settlements in the area, and just within the sanctuary borders, we have more than 300 kilometers of roads that interconnect everything as a spider web.
And the roads weren't just for everyday use. You had to have special permission to be on them.
Not everybody was allowed to enter Machu Picchu.
The discovery and clearing of trails has revealed the presence of numerous control posts built to filter access to the city. Ingenious checkpoints located at regular intervals, such as these suspension bridges from which the Incas could remove wooden logs to deny access to visitors. Or entranceways, once fitted with doors to control access to various sacred sites of the city.
Here, we're very close to the Sun Gate in Tipunku. But before we get there, we have this double jump door. This is what we call a double jump door. It's 2 levels of the door, and probably this will have had 2 dintels. Having a double jump door means that you're entering to a more important or sacred space.
Safe passage was an important part of the society surviving in that landscape. The network of roads that the Incas created across very hostile terrain was an information highway akin to the internet of our own age.
They were mainly for military use, and of course, you had the runners that would take messages back and forth, and they travelled hundreds of kilometres a day. It's quite amazing.
So it was a means of communication between all corners of the empire.
Exploring this network of highly protected roads is allowing the site's archaeologists to understand the true significance of this now famous citadel. A city which is beginning to look more and more like a megalopolis as additional sites within the sanctuary are discovered.
Machu Picchu is not alone in the wilderness. It's actually part of a network of Inca sites.
There's still a lot of things that we are starting to understand about Machu Picchu. So in the last 5 years, we have been intensively excavating not only Machu Picchu, but other sites within the historic sanctuary borders.
By exploring this network of sites, investigators have unveiled a new gateway to the citadel, a site called Chabamba. The ruins of this site were first discovered in 1940, but now investigators are undertaking a new campaign of archaeological excavations.
We are at the site of Chabamba, at the entrance to the Machu Picchu Historical National Park.
A satellite scale makes it possible to visualize the exact location of Chabamba, a gateway to Machu Picchu positioned in a valley 7 kilometers from the heart of the city. The site exposes the vast size of this historical park. But it's excavations on the ground that allow archaeologists to determine what links this site to the city. They have discovered a remarkable concentration of 14 fountains which shed new light on the importance of Machu Picchu within the empire.
We think that these fountains were used by visitors to purify themselves before entering the city of Machu Picchu.
Dominika Sikskowska is an archaeologist from the Center of Andean Studies at the University of Warsaw in Cusco. Today, she is leading a team to explore a new area of Chabamba. She is hunting for other structures which could, like the fountains, offer precious information to experts. Several days ago, the archaeologist and her team scanned the area using lidar. Now, she is back in the field to uncover mysterious structures that the device has located in the jungle. Structures which would be impossible to locate so quickly with the naked eye.
Of course it saves time. I don't have to cover the entire jungle looking for structures that might not exist. Now, I only go to the places where we think something might be.
We started our research fairly recently, but thanks to this new technology, we realized that previously mistakes were made. There were a lot of structures that we didn't locate correctly on the map. That's why we have to increase our exploring work to correct the cartography and planimetry of Machu Picchu.
For aerial lidar technology to be useful to Dominika and her team on the ground, she works with researchers who first analyze the data, then send her the precise geographic coordinates of any structures which have been located.
So this dot here is me, and the others are the structures that I have to get to. This way I can see how far they are away from me.
In addition to these geographic coordinates, Dominica has received an infrared image of the structure scanned by the LIDAR.
It's just there, isn't it?
The image provides clues about the shape of the structure she's trying to locate.
The photo that they sent me is this cloud of points, and it corresponds to the structure that we can see here. And here I can see that it has been more or less cleaned. The next step will be to dig and determine how and why this wall was built on this spot.
The wall Dominica has located today will soon be excavated and can then be 3D modeled and studied in closer detail. This scanning and exploration work, which was started several years ago, allows researchers to improve and clarify the mapping of the Machu Picchu sanctuary. But it also allows them to model the explored areas, sites like the citadel itself or the additional sites like Chabamba. This is an invaluable technological advancement for the understanding of this area. Today, experts have access to perspectives and scales of study which would otherwise remain entirely inaccessible to the naked eye.
For us, it is essential because it contributes to the knowledge of the site. We shouldn't limit ourselves to describing the monument. You have to explain it, understand Machu Picchu's function.
As well as contributing to revelations about Machu Picchu's true scale, this new method of exploration is beginning to reveal answers to another key mystery. What was the function of Machu Picchu within the Inca Empire?
In Machu Picchu, they've put a community on top of a mountain, and that suggests that they wanted something other than just to build a city or a community. It has something else which was important to the Incas.
Thanks to the research that we have been doing in the past few years, now we understand a little bit more what was the function of the different areas. And we can say that Machu Picchu is a multifunction site.
The exact nature and number of functions that Machu Picchu's had within the empire is still cause for debate amongst experts. But a recent discovery has finally allowed for agreement on one: Machu Picchu's role as an astronomical observatory.
One of our most important discoveries concerned the sites for observing natural phenomena, which gave rhythm to city life. That is to say, the discovery of sites dedicated to astronomical observations.
The most impressive part of Machu Picchu are basically the astronomical observatories.
Machu Picchu was clearly a site for observing the sun's movements and for observing solstices and equinoxes.
It was very important for the Incas to observe closely these astronomical phenomena, not only because of the ritual calendar of the Incas, but also it had relationship with the moment of planting and harvesting.
Like many farming civilizations, the Inca organized their lives to the rhythm of the seasons. Observing the sky and the movement of the sun was essential to keeping track of the passing seasons and in anticipating the arrival of particularly violent rains in the region. Experts have long known about a few key sites in the city that were designed for astronomical observation. But 2 years ago, for the first time in Machu Picchu's history, investigators used new technology to uncover a remarkable site, unlike any other found in the empire.
Machete.
A unique observatory hidden under the tropical jungle vegetation on the north face of the Huayana Picchu mountain, which has never been revealed to the general public.
This place is El Mirador of Incaracay, and it's basically the only Inca structure of its kind that is still standing.
This unique site, which can now be located by using LIDAR to virtually clear the area of its vegetation, was spotted for the first time in 1980 by the archaeologist Fernando Astete. But due to a lack of means, it wasn't until 30 years later, in 2012, that an excavation campaign was started on the site. Overlooking a foundation terrace, archaeologists discovered the remains of walls with stones that had been cut particularly carefully and regularly. Preparation of the kind reserved for buildings of prestige and of high importance to the Inca. On the main facade, the archaeologists also located two openings, very different to anything they had discovered on other walls built by the Inca.
So in this fine masonry wall, what we have is two orifices, one here and one over there.
Convinced they had uncovered a structure built for a very particular function, they decided to return the following year to run a more advanced investigation that would finally unravel the mystery of this building. To see further than the human eye, the archaeologists teamed up with Polish researchers to organize the scanning of the entire site. Their aim was to model it and expose its function. Without scanning or modeling, there would be no way for experts in the field to study the structure in its entirety. Its location on the steep slope of a mountainside makes it impossible to observe the building's layout and parts as a whole. So it was only thanks to a study of a virtual model that investigators could reveal the secret of its true function.
With the recent investigations made by Fernando Astete and Professors Szukowski and Skosiuk, that now we know for sure that this is a precise astronomical instrument.
The unique perspectives given by the 3D model allowed Polish and Peruvian scientists to carry out a detailed study of the two openings which first intrigued them. They first discovered that the orientation of these two openings made it possible for the Inca to form a horizon marker from the sacred summit of Mount Yanantin, situated to the north of Machu Picchu. Then, they reconstructed the ancient positions of celestial bodies to establish what exactly the Inca astronomers were observing through the holes. Today, 3D modeling offers us a unique opportunity to recreate the past and discover what exactly the Incas saw 500 years ago when they looked through the openings of this building, which is now known as the Inca Rakai Observatory.
What we have here is an instrument that the Incas will use to watch the June solstice and also the Pleiades.
The orientation of the southern opening allowed for the perfect study of the rising of the Pleiades, a group of stars whose brightness and position in relation to Mount Yanantin allowed the Inca to forecast the seasons. The northern opening allowed them to detect with incredible precision the day of the June solstice. Inca astronomers managed to orientate this opening so that it let in the sun's light precisely when it rose over Mount Yanantin, but only upon the exact day of the June solstice. As well as determining the extraordinary function of the structure, scientists have solved the mystery of how it was used.
So we are in the inner part of El Mirador structure. And what we have here is the two orifices. How these things function, the priest astronomers will actually, in this case, in the left orifice, they will not look directly because looking directly to the sun can get you blind. They will just see the projection of the light here on this other back wall. And for watching the Pleiades, the priest astronomer will position himself here inside the niche and will watch through the orifice
It's absolutely breathtaking.
They wanted isolation, and they wanted to be closer to their God.
It's ideal for observations because we have what we call horizon astronomy, which means that the horizon is used as a reference with these mountains.
In Machu Picchu, they have an incredible understanding of their environment.
Technological progress and the tireless work of experts at Machu Picchu is revealing the genius of the Inca and exposing their extraordinary knowledge of the environment. Some of the most glaring proof of this knowledge is revealed in the construction of the city itself, built on a particularly hostile site with difficult access and extremely high rainfall.
The climate in Machu Picchu was a real challenge for the Inca.
Tons and tons of rain falling from the sky every single year. So you need to slowly release it. And if you don't deal with it in the right way, it's just going to wash your civilization down the hillside.
But it's also a complicated relationship. Clearly, we need water to survive.
Both a deadly threat and an essential element to man, the problem of water has long been at the heart of explorers' research, and it still interests experts today. How did the builders of Machu Picchu manage to both protect the city from this devastating element and exploit it to survive? How did Inca engineers manage to rise up and solve the challenge of water?
Rainfall at the time when it was built is estimated to have been around 2 meters a year.
Even today, floods and landslides regularly destroy homes and roads in this region. But Machu Picchu's buildings have survived for over 5 centuries.
The Inca were affected by these destructive natural phenomena, but they studied the dangers in order to face them.
We could learn a thing or two from the Incas. You know, the way that we design our cities today, we need to think about how we deal with excess water, how we deal with runoff.
No written testimony by the Inca has ever been found. So, it's only by searching for clues in the exposed parts of the city that experts have managed, piece by piece, to unravel the secret of how the city withstood the devastating threat posed by water.
More than 50% of the effort destined to build Machu Picchu is underground.
If we look at Machu Picchu, we see buildings on the surface. What we don't see is that 60% is underground. 60% of that city is dealing with water and getting rid of it.
The secret to the city's survival was found hidden underground, beneath the feet of its visitors. An ingenious underground drainage system, the visible parts of which are these iconic terraces. Surprisingly, the best way to measure the extent of this underground system is to take to the sky and scan the site on an aerial scale. From the air, we discover the incredible scope of these structures, a succession of staircase terraces of exceptional regularity. They act as an armor around the citadel, covering the steep mountain slopes. But it's by probing the depth that we discover the true genius of these structures, a natural drainage system invisible to the naked eye, which allows the control of rainwater and the protection of the mountain from landslides.
So this is an example of a retention wall of a terrace. Now, inside these terraces, what we have will allow rainwater to infiltrate slowly, and it won't affect the structure.
It was excavation work that allowed past experts to understand the function of these terraces and their stages of construction, stages which 3D imagery can now recreate. To construct these terraces, Inca builders started by erecting a retaining wall on the steep side of the mountain. Then they filled in the area behind this wall with 4 layers of different materials.
What we have is big rocks then medium gravel, then we have some sand mixed with fine gravel, and then we have the fertile soil.
And then this just gets rid of the water in a controlled environment.
The layers of different sized material stop the ground from getting excessively waterlogged, which would weaken it. It also regulates the release of water. The Inca constructed these terraces one by one, shaping this incredible staircase structure cut into the mountainside.
It's the foundations for an effective drainage of rainwater that have made Machu Picchu survive for hundreds of years.
Can you imagine? Building these terraces, it's monumental work.
Machu Picchu's terraces are not just something decorative, they are something structural.
If they didn't do that, if the Incas hadn't put these systems in place, they wouldn't have had a citadel to talk about. It would have been washed down the hill. It would have gone.
That is one of their engineering skills, is to realize where the threat comes from and then to address that threat through design and through engineering.
In the last 20 years, with these systematic excavations, we understand way more about how Machu Picchu was built.
Excavations and traditional research allowed experts to determine the function of these terraces. But today, investigators are using new technology to gather fresh clues and uncover a new secret about the true extent of the city's foundation. Archaeologists investigating previously unexplored areas around Machu Picchu discovered something surprising. Contrary to long-held beliefs, the terraces weren't only built around the citadel on the upper part of the mountain. Their exploration work using litter and 3D modeling allowed them to identify and uncover new plots of terraces in the lower part of the mountain.
Actually, what happened these past few years during the work on the terraces is that we discovered that they reach all the way down to the river.
The whole mountain is protected by these kinds of walls. It's the challenge of man against nature. Such a masterpiece on land, shaped like this.
From an engineering point of view, we just have to stand back and say, that's really impressive.
By unlocking the secrets of these iconic terraces, experts have uncovered the ingenious Inca engineering that protects Machu Picchu from the devastating threat of water. But now they face a new mystery. Once the threat posed by water was removed, how did the ancient engineers meet the second challenge to conserve and exploit this essential element for survival? How did they supply a city perched at an altitude of 2,400 meters with an uninterrupted supply of water for more than a century? Solving this mystery is the challenge for Alicia Fernandez, an archaeologist specializing in water.
The Inca engineers had to know the environment and the site's weather conditions perfectly before settling here, especially with the torrential rain.
This has been thought out. Someone has actually gone to this site and thought, we need water to do this, we need water to do this before we build anything.
They had to gather the most information possible beforehand to anticipate and then build a suitable hydraulic system which would guarantee the longevity of the population and the construction of the city.
This shows the level of planning that you would talk about with modern-day megastructures.
Their first mission before planning any structure was to find the water source.
Now the source, which motivated the construction of the city and supplied it with water for over 100 years, has been located at an altitude of 2,458 meters on the eastern side of the mountain. A unique source which is at the origin of an incredible hydraulic system.
This is a sacred source which determined the place where the city was constructed. As you can see, the water is already filtered by the mountain when it arrives here. And once the Inca found the source, they were able to build a channeling system.
The water system that has been discovered at Machu Picchu shows that there was running water all the time.
The route of the canal adapts perfectly to the terrain topography. There is a 21-meter difference in level between this water source and the city's first fountain. It was perfect.
Following the terrain's natural 3% incline, the water from this unique source was guided to the city built below, thanks to a series of sculpted blocks of stone just 10 to 12 centimeters wide. This channeling system allowed the city to be supplied with 150 liters of water every minute, 200,000 liters of water a day for the citizens of Machu Picchu.
Here, the flow rate is low because it is summertime. But in general, with the rains, the source is much more plentiful and there is much more water than this. A lot more.
And the channels they've built, they're capable of taking twice the amount of water that the springs can provide, so they'll never be overwhelmed. And it was a way of maintaining a clean drinking source of water for the people, which enabled the civilization to flourish.
So throughout the city, there's this whole canalization of channels which diffuse the water to outfall areas.
To distribute water around the city, canal channels were branched and multiplied into an immense web, capable of supplying water to each of the 17 fountains in the urban area.
We are at the first of the 17 fountains that exist in the city. And all of the fountains registered in the sector share a similar design. They all have a water inlet, which can be opened or closed, and an outlet channel.
The inhabitants of Machu Picchu had access to fresh water all year round, enough to fulfill their needs and to celebrate the sacred rituals which gave rhythm to city life. To reach the urban areas, the system of channels also crossed the agricultural zone, but it wasn't intended to irrigate the land.
The agriculture there, they had no form of irrigation. They didn't need it. They had the rain. The gods would give them all the water they wanted.
The more than 2,000 millimeters of annual rainfall in Machu Picchu are enough to have agriculture of corn here. This channel is just for providing water to the urban sector. It just happened that the source of water is on the other side of the Machu Picchu mountain. And, well, it has to cross the agricultural sector.
The agricultural zone is made up of the iconic foundation terraces. Thanks to the underground drainage system, rainwater could irrigate these terraces without flooding them. A controlled flow of water supplied the layer of fertile ground and allowed for corn to grow.
Also, most part of the agricultural sector is directly oriented to the east, to the sunrise. In this way, the terraces can capture most of the sunlight during the day and can generate a special atmosphere at nighttime for the crops.
In Machu Picchu, they have worked in tune with nature rather than against it.
This relationship between architecture and landscape is exceptional.
It's genius, the system of not only getting rid of excess water, but equally delivering drinking water all year round.
Thanks to a mastery of civil engineering techniques and a perfect knowledge of their environment, the Inca were able to overcome the challenge set by water and turn this threat into a strength while maintaining the breathtaking scenery that surrounded them. But with the mountain protected from landslides and a source of water located, another challenge awaited the Inca: the construction of the city itself. At the peak of the eponymous mountain, the city of Machu Picchu, built in the middle of the 15th century, sheltered between 500 and 700 inhabitants. With nearly 200 buildings and terraces carved into the stone, it remains the best preserved urban creation of Inca civilization.
Machu Picchu is actually the most complete Inca site. It's the most impressive living testimony of Inca civilization.
When you're looking to locate a city, a settlement, a community, you're looking at trade routes, you're looking at lowest crossing points on rivers. But in Machu Picchu, on top of a mountain, that is something special. We're still learning today or theorizing today how they may have done it.
So as an architect, I really wish that I can have like a time machine and go back in time and see how they did it.
Without a time machine or written testimonies, experts attempting to unravel the mystery behind the construction of these unshakable walls have to base their research on archaeological and geological excavations. The first question is about the origin of the raw material used to build the city. Where do these stones come from? And how were they transported to a site so high up a steep-sided slope? To answer this question, geologists like Victor Carlotto took an interest in the site's topography, as it was 500 years ago when the Inca first arrived.
We're in the western part of the Inca city of Machu Picchu. It's a sector we call the quarry. It gives us an idea of what the site looked like before the construction of the city. This is what it looked like when the Inca arrived.
When the Inca first discovered the site, 80% of its surface was covered by these stunning geological formations. To solve the mystery of its origin, it is necessary to study it on different scales. First of all, on a microscopic scale, this rock revealed its nature to experts. It is granite, a magmatic rock originating from the depth of the earth.
Granite is an igneous rock. It's a rock that comes from the center of the earth in a molten form.
These granite rocks formed 250 million years ago and at a depth of over 5 kilometers.
But to understand how this granite traveled from the depth of the earth to the summit of this mountain, we must take to the sky and view the area on a satellite scale. On this scale, we can locate the citadel in the heart of the Andean mountains, the longest continental mountain range in the world, up to 800 kilometer wide, stretching over 7,000 kilometer long, and peaking at an altitude of 6,900 meters. It is the formation of this impressive mountain range which is at the origin of its specific geology, known as granitic chaos.
When the Andes were formed, these granitic rocks rose to the surface and broke apart.
During the formation of the Andes, over 200 million years ago, this magmatic rock formed at depth and slowly rose to the Earth's surface. As it rose, it cooled and fractured. Then, erosion of the upper layers of the mountain slowly revealed it at the surface. As torrential rainwater seeped into the gaps, it accentuated the cracks. Due to gravity on the steep terrain, the blocks finally separated, fell, collided, and piled up, creating the rocky heap of granitic chaos discovered by the Inca upon their arrival. A disordered rock pile, giving the site an uneven and rugged relief particularly unsuitable for construction.
The city was built on this chaos. Living here was a real challenge.
But the Inca of Machu Picchu managed to profit from this inhospitable geological architecture by exploiting it as a quarry to build the city. It gave their buildings the impression of being a natural extension of the mountain.
Machu Picchu is fascinating because of where it is located and how the Incas transformed the mountain with this organic architecture that doesn't break nature but blends with it.
What distinguishes Machu Picchu from other sites is the symbiosis between the architectural work and the nature surrounding it.
What we wonder today is, how did the Inca take up this challenge and manage to build a city which has lasted centuries and is still standing today?
With the question of the raw materials' origin resolved, the next mystery is about the construction of these indestructible walls. This natural granite quarry offered the Incas an ideal building material as hard as concrete, but how did they work with it? How did they manage to cut it when historians agree that the Inca used neither tools nor machines?
Granite is a very hard material, one of the most difficult materials to actually shape, to work, to cut, and yet they chose to build a city out of it.
Granite is a very, very hard rock, and it's usually worked with iron.
Without iron tools, to actually shape these huge blocks is just amazing.
Without cranes, without machines as we have today, this is a really amazing achievement and probably unrepeatable.
Fernando Astete is the director of the Machu Picchu Archaeological Park. He has been studying the secrets of this area for many years. Now, he has developed a theory that has become widely recognized by his peers. According to him, the answers to the questions concerning cutting granite can be found on the site and explained on a microscopic scale. On this site, hematite, natural iron oxide with a resistance superior to granite, can be found.
You see, it's easy to cut.
According to Fernando Astete, the Inca used hematite as a natural hammer. By banging the two rocks together, they could cut blocks irregularly but with extreme precision.
The engineers that were able to shape the granite into such irregular forms with such close bonding between the different materials is amazing.
But once cut, how were these granite blocks assembled and fixed in place so they wouldn't move for 500 years? Once again, Fernando Astete has uncovered clues that help answer this question. He's discovered a construction site abandoned by Inca stoneworkers and still visible today. The site gives him an incredible opportunity to study the work methods of Inca builders.
Here we have a very clear example left by the Incas. We see that the top face of this rock has nearly finished being polished. The stone above it visibly still needs to be worked on. Once polished, the two surfaces are supposed to coincide. Here, we have a wedge holding up this block. If we took it away, this curve would coincide with this one, and that face with this one.
Once again, the use of 3D models has complemented the investigators' research and observation work. It allows them to better visualize the different stages of ancient stoneworking. To ensure that the granite blocks fit perfectly together, the Inca first selected a block upon which they placed the wedge. Then they placed the second block on top of the first and finished their cutting. The Inca sculpted the surfaces of the top block and bottom block until they matched. Once the shapes of the two surfaces were harmonized, the Incas took out the wedge. The two blocks fitted together and stayed in place without cement or mortar.
And mortar is there to keep material apart, using irregular material to create a level bed so that you can create vertical structures. At Machu Picchu, they threw away the mortar. They didn't need it because they were so good at shaping the stones. And these unusual shapes, they're like a jigsaw.
They're all built to fit the hole, and there's virtually no space in the joints. You can't put a knife or a piece of paper in there.
And now, in times of earthquake, it's the buildings of the Incas that survive rather than the buildings that were built 10 years ago.
They're all together working as a unit, and that's the goal. It's a unit moving all together.
The architect, André Dasme, has been studying the walls of Inca temples for years. He wants to unravel their secrets. One of these mysteries concerns the resistance of these walls to earthquakes that regularly shake the region.
We have already in the last 200 years, two big ones, 1960, 1650, long way ago, right? But both are still, the walls are here just like the way it was.
In 1950, a terrible earthquake devastated Cusco, 80 kilometers from Machu Picchu. The buildings constructed by the Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century crumbled, whereas the Inca walls, built 1 century earlier, remained standing. Investigators trying to unlock the mystery of these invincible walls' seismic resistance have discovered new proof of incredible civil engineering techniques mastered by the Inca.
In the first layer, in the first foundation, they have small stones, like circular stone, rounded stones. And the idea is work like a skate. So it moves all together and it's not cracking. Otherwise, if it's steady and really strength, it will crack with the earthquakes. In this case, it's moving, you know, as the earthquakes happening, making the stones are supported one with another, and that makes that it works all as a one element, right? Moving like this.
The Incas were the best engineers of their time.
They were on top of their technology in their lifetime.
They didn't have paper, nor architectural plans. Everything depended on their great intelligence. They were truly incredible architects and builders who had everything in memory and worked with no written traces or drawings.
The Incas didn't write anything, nor engrave information into stone.
The main sources for understanding the Incas come from Spanish chronicles, and there's still a lot of things that we do not understand fully.
Little by little, over the decades, through research and technological progress, from the heart of the city to the depth of the tropical jungle, the hidden mysteries of Machu Picchu have slowly been unraveled. And even if it still has many more secrets to expose, experts are far from running out of leads in their hunt for answers. The most unexpected one is based on a mysterious system coded using tiny knotted ropes found in different places over the Inca Empire called quipu, a system currently being studied thousands of kilometers away from the sanctuary at Harvard University. It is here that a distinguished American anthropologist and his student are on the cusp of deciphering it.
Up until very, very recently, it was always believed that it was record keeping. But recent research at Harvard University is starting to demonstrate that it's actually a linguistic system as well.
The team of Gary Urton has already been successful, showing us information that was recorded on quipus.
If they're able to decipher or translate what it means, then that would be a revelation.
Within these knotted cords, we effectively could be looking at the secret of the Incas, the secret of Machu Picchu.
A secret with a quest which has motivated researchers around the world for over 100 years and will undoubtedly continue to do so for a long time.